Everybody? Everybody good? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 12th, 2024 Board of Education meeting. Call to order of the special meeting is President Mr. Krasnoff, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Jacobson. Mrs. Rinaldi is joining us this evening via Zoom. Mr. Asa, Max Canelli, and Mr. Peterson, as well as Mr. Testani, our superintendent, and our student board members. Welcome. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, we're starting with our annual organizational meeting. First order of business is election of temporary chair/secretary. Recommended motion that in accordance with the bylaws, Superintendent Michael J. Testani serve as temporary chair/secretary during the election of board officers. Can I get a motion? Mrs. Flynn, seconded by Mr. Asa. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. I didn't, so make sure I don't forget you, Mrs. Rinaldi back there, 9-0. All right. You're up.
Wow, can I get a motion to adjourn? Out of power.
Sure.
Okay, we will start. Is there any nominations for chair? Ms. Flynn?
I'd like to nominate Jennifer Jacobson for chair.
Jacobson, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Just want to make sure we got this right. Any other nominations for chair? Mr. Asa?
I would like to nominate Mr. Jeff Peterson.
Mr. Peterson, do you accept this nomination?
I do.
Are there any other names to be submitted for nomination for chair? Okay. All right, so we'll do this in a roll call vote so that we can get this accurately on the record. Start with Mr. Krasnoff.
Jacobson.
Mr. Lee.
Mr. Peterson.
Obviously, Ms. Flynn. Ms. Guernsey.
Mrs. Jacobson.
Mrs. Rinaldi.
Mr. Peterson.
Sorry, Mrs.
No
Jacobson.
worries, Mrs. Jacobson.
Mr. Asa.
Mr. Peterson.
Ms. Maxim Canelli.
Mr. Peterson.
And Mr. Peterson.
Peterson.
Okay. Vote is Mr. Peterson, 5. Mrs. Jacobson, 4. Mr. Peterson is elected chair. Congratulations. Is there a nomination for vice chair? Ms. Jacobson.
I'd like to nominate Mrs. Guernsey.
Mrs. Guernsey, do you accept this nomination?
I accept it.
Yes. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, all in favor of Mrs. Guernsey as vice chair? This is Mr. Krasnoff.
Yes. You could do
You
it.
could just raise our hands if you want.
All in favor? Okay, that is 9-0.
You might want
Hey, I'm
to just roll call it to say Mr. Peter, like go around. If you want to leave your hands up so he can get it.
Mr. Peterson, Ms. Maxim Canelli, Ms. Jacobson, Mrs. Rinaldi, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Flynn, Mr. Lee, Mr. Krasnoff. I called her. Any nays? Mr. Asa, 8-1. Congratulations, Mrs. Guernsey. Is there a nomination for secretary?
I nominate Katie Flynn.
Ms. Flynn, do you accept the nomination?
I
Are there any other nominations for secretary? Okay. All in favor of Mrs. Flynn as secretary, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Krasnoff, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Flynn, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Rinaldi, Ms. Maxine Kennelly, Mr. Peterson, all opposed. Mr. Asa, 8-1. Congratulations, Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you.
I will now yield my temporary chair assignment to the chair, Mr. Peterson.
Shifting. Gosh. Sorry, thank you.
We actually have a bunch of business to continue to conduct. I'll move on with that. The next item on the agenda, discussion of Board of Education bylaws. This is the time of year that normally we can make bylaw changes at any point during the year, brought up by board members, but this is usually a time when we throw it out to members and see if there's anything they want to discuss or potentially want to add. So these are not things that we would necessarily vote on tonight, but I'd like to open the board any proposals if anyone has any ideas that they want to bring forward for bylaw. Mrs. Kennelly?
As part of our policy audit, there are a few things flagged in the bylaws that I have been remiss in addressing while trying to get through other policies. I'm hoping to use this window of time as kind of a natural point to get to those points. But I will let you know if I get that work done in plenty of time before the next meeting.
Great, thanks. Ms. Jacobson?
So now that we're in the organizational meeting in section 1, our bylaws are out of compliance or in violation of the charter in terms of when we hold our organizational meeting. So not looking to do that right now, but to make us whole in terms of being in harmony with the town charter, where all boards and commissions are to have their organizational meeting and elect officers in. So I can do the next meeting or submit it to you.
That's fine. I
Literally going to be changing November to December.
understand exactly. Thank you. Ms. Tracy?
I have a question with regard to, I know Mrs. Jacobson said she consulted the town attorney. Procedurally, one of the things that we've talked about in years past is what happens if somebody is in a position of leadership and their term expires. And there is a vacancy before the next people are sworn in and start, which I believe is one of the reasons we've done this. And there's never been, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to this, but I'm just wondering, and I'm throwing it out there, I'd have to think about how that would happen if somebody in leadership is up for reelection next year, for example, and either doesn't get reelected or doesn't run. Would there potentially be a meeting with a vacancy or multiple vacancies?
I might answer to that Robert's rules is actually pretty specific that if a chair is not at a meeting, for example, that the vice chair can take that as a temporary chairmanship and so forth. And even in the absence of all elected officers, the body can still elect its own for a specific meeting, its own leaders for that meeting. But we can certainly look into that further. I don't know if, Ms. Jacobs.
Yeah, we could certainly learn from the other boards. Our TM Board of Finance, I'll do it in December, so I'm sure they've discussed this issue. And if we calendar piece, there really shouldn't be a meeting gap, so between swearing in, but understand the concern and.
Not even a concern, it's just more procedural, but I think to your point there, I think that suffices for me.
It might be messier, but as Mrs.
Yeah.
Jacobs says, I'm sure it's happened before.
Yeah. Thank you.
Your thoughts on bylaws? Moving on from that, we have item 6 on our agenda, the question of the 2025 Board of Education Member Committee and Liaison Assignments. There's always a fun list too. I think these are very important. I kind of like the distribution that we have now, but this is the time for board members to, if they have any preferences, they want to move from one place to another. We would need to get these in pretty quickly, as soon as next week. I believe we have a policy committee meeting and a facilities committee meeting next week. I believe last year, Mrs. Jacobson, please.
So just, these would take normally effect in December, not in November. They're one-year terms, so, usually the organizational meetings and setting of the calendars to get over to town clerk are all held in December. So these were all assigned, December 4th-ish, around there. So I think just, procedurally, we would go through November and then, and take over on November, in early December, I guess.
No, I appreciate that. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries, no
A
worries.
lot of this is going to be.
I mean, this meeting tonight was actually extraordinarily early for us too, so.
I think last year's was right before Thanksgiving, so correct.
Was.
I will know that, but anyway, please, if we can get these in sooner rather than later, just to make sure that we know what the makeup is going to be and where there may be holes that we need to fill. Everyone on this board knows how important these seats are. The next thing that we're going to look at is the 2025 meeting calendar. And Mr. Jacobs, that's something that we do need to submit to the town clerk, trying to avoid with other town bodies. In keeping with past practice, I think this would go on November 26th agenda for this board. So if there are any concerns or issues about it, we can address those then, certainly talk about them now. Mr. Asen.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we vote on these. I believe we just, if there's conflicts, we'll let you know and then we can discuss it at the next meeting, but I don't believe we need to vote on them. Right?
I can double check that, but in any case, we don't need to get this in
No, I think we have some.
this month. So you could take time and look at schedule.
I'll just tell you, Mrs. Jacobson and Mrs. Guernsey and I and Mr. Testani went over the original draft and it made some adjustments to this already. So, I think she could probably fill you in after the meeting.
Anyway,
Please.
so just a couple of changes really quickly is we did discuss having a separate meeting, not in May. May is very, very busy for all of our schools. Kind of going back to that idea of having a standalone student award night. So that's slated in here for June 3rd. We did check with the two head principals that this date worked for them and what's happening in our high schools at that time of year. So that's one kind of a change. You'll notice that November 24 and 25, 2025 are in red. Just being, staying with our tradition of that November change, not presuming that we will change the bylaws. It's slated in here. But likely, if we do come into harmony, the organizational would move to December 9th. So that's why it's in red. So just wanted to highlight those two different points.
Ms. Maximilian.
Just one question. Correct me if I'm wrong. This self-evaluation date in February is quite early. I was wondering if there was a reason for that.
It's the same time we did it this year,
February?
end of February, like after break.
Okay. Because I know our bylaws say it has to be done by the end of April. And I don't know if anybody remembers why we started moving it earlier.
I don't remember, but I just slated it in the same kind of spot that it was.
Okay.
Mr. Asen.
One other thing to note that was a change from past practice is with regard to the budget meetings. Correct? So we used to do at the end of Tuesday, Thursday. We've spread it out over 4 Tuesdays now in order to give people more time and the administration more time to make everything work and get questions answered and whatnot. That is a notable change from past practice.
Is this likely to, not that you can look in a crystal ball, but is part of the reason this could work is because that January 7th was so late? Because I thought part of the issue used to be staff being able to be ready for that first meeting. So that's why we couldn't always do it then.
I think these dates will work for us.
I'm just talking about so that a
Yeah.
subsequent year where
Right.
the Tuesdays are going to fall differently, it's possible we might not replicate this.
It's possible, but I like having the four dates. I think that was a good idea to do. So it gives us more time to respond to questions and Also gives the board more time to submit their questions.
Lee,
Question about those budget meetings. Do we want to start them earlier? Like at 6, or do we normally keep them at 7? I don't remember what we did last year. I thought we did start them earlier, or we did not.
not 6. I mean, I think we had this 7 PM time.
30.
We pushed it back, okay. All right.
Is there interest in doing that? I know when we decided to change our regular meeting times back to 7, part of the discussion at that point was we didn't want to put it too early so that it would conflict with work schedules and school schedules.
Traffic.
And things. Yeah. Pushing early sounds great, but it's complicated.
I would just throw out to Mr. Lee's point, maybe, I don't know if this is something to think about. It is 4 meetings, 1 month for our staff too. So while I agree that 7 PM isn't the best start all the time, maybe something to chew on that for the month of January, being cognizant of everybody that has to be here and how late isn't a bad idea, Mr. Lee.
Any other thoughts on the schedule? All right, with that, I'll come back before us, but with that, I will take a motion to adjourn this special meeting of the Board of Education. Mrs. Jacobson, seconded by Mr. Lee, all in favor? Vote is unanimous. Thank you. We're moving directly into next meeting. Mr. Rinaldi, excuse me, are you still with us?
I am.
Thank you. I'm sorry, just wanted to check. All right, if you give me just a second, let's hit the gavel here. And call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education for the 12th of November, 2024. Present, we have Mr. Krasnov, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Flynn, myself, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. Asa, along with Superintendent Testani and our student representatives, and Mrs. Rinaldi. And with that, I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Maxon Kennelly, would you lead us?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and we'll begin with student reports.
So recently had Veterans Day, of course, a great ceremony on Monday. So our school honored veterans by putting small American flags around the entire campus. And we also had our veterans concert, which took place on Thursday.
Okay, we're starting up intramurals again. Intramurals just after school, students can come in and play sports. They have to register through Infinite Campus, I believe. And they can just come in, play a sport. The sports change, I think, weekly or every so often. It's just a way to de-stress and relax and take a break from school and get a breath.
Very much chill, like, playing with your brother in the backyard. We just had repairs done to our track, so it pushed back the preseason for a lot of sports that are taking place on the track. But, it's good to have a nice, fully functioning track again.
Where orchestra will be hosting the Violins for Hope concert. It's just a Holocaust memorial concert where students use instruments that were used in the Holocaust to play songs.
We had a parent coffee recently, which is where Dr. Hatzis and Ms. Montorsi have basically kind of a brunch with parents of students, and they just talk about the issues going on at the school, what they're expecting, students to learn, just why it's good that their students are in the school.
Homecoming will be held on the 22nd of November, and this year tickets will be sold online.
No more 30-minute wait. Cafeteria. I can eat now instead of waiting in line. We have Alumni Day on the 27th of November, which for me is one of the best days of the year. You get to see all the old alumni. They come back, they say hi to old teachers, old friends. And obviously, you have friends that are a year older than you, and they come back after their year, halfway through college. just fun to see them again.
Dr. Hatzis sends out an email to all the students and they can register online. That's how they come in. Senior Spirit. So dress up days or senior spirit days are every Friday for the month of November. And we will have our our annual blood drive, which will be held on the 11th of December. So we're keeping that in mind.
Our last few spirits were Halloween, obviously. I won the Halloween contest for the duos. Thank you. So dressed as? Oh, a French person. Very original, very original. And then we had anything but a backpack day, which I guess everyone forgot about. Because I was the only one with, it wasn't a backpack.
Which was,
So I used to live in Asia, so I have these 2 rice buckets. So I had them on a stick and I walked around school.
nice.
For you.
It felt like a really good workout. I'm not gonna lie. I look back. And then we have Decades Day coming up and Country versus Country Club.
And most of the sports are coming to an end. Volleyball just finished in the quarterfinals. I don't know where field hockey is. I believe they're playing tonight. I don't know the outcome yet. I don't know. Most other sports have also finished. I know those are the 2 I can remember off the top of my head.
And then obviously Thanksgiving game against Ward, go Ludlow.
Is that Ludlow?
Oh, what? Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, home game.
Always. Better stadium, better field.
Jeez.
Oh,
Not my problem.
Good evening, board, and I'm so sorry. Okay, to start off, we have our fall play, which is Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors coming up. It's a performance by the Ward Drama Team in the Black Box at Ward. It's produced and directed by our very own Miss Mateen, who's taking over after the drama director retired after many, many years last year. Opening night will be Friday, November 22nd at 7 p.m., followed by the second performance at 7 p.m. as well on Saturday, and then concluded with a matinee performance at 2 p.m. on Sunday. Tickets are on sale now, and they can also be purchased at the door.
We would also want to take this opportunity to honor and express our gratitude to all those who have served our country with dedication and courage as we observe Veterans Day on Monday.
In partnership with the Fairfield Police Department Safety Division Unit, we will be hosting a presentation on Wednesday, tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. in the auditorium. All are welcome to attend, students, parents, any other guests that are interested in that presentation are all welcome to join us in the board auditorium tomorrow.
Last Monday, Fairfield High School administered the DESA student self-report during a 15-minute homeroom period. And the survey is designed to gain insight into our students' social, emotional development. And it identifies areas where additional support may be needed for them. And it works to improve our interpersonal skills by promoting overall well-being.
Okay, also this week on Thursday, November 14th, the College and Career Center will be hosting Financial Aid Night. Financial Aid Night this Thursday, November 14th via Zoom at 7 p.m. Both students and families of seniors are encouraged to join. It's a great opportunity for students and families to be able to prepare for the financial drawbacks that may come with college and other careers.
We will also have the Violence for Hope School program on Wednesday in the auditorium. And the program will commemorate life through music, including an expedition of violence, which will be played by students that belong to Holocaust survivors.
Returning to the theme of future planning and college visits, our robust College and Career Center has hosted an array of universities and colleges over the past few months for interested juniors and seniors during the school day. We have welcomed over 150 schools to present to students, and it's been a great resource to any students in need of help or just further information.
Our athletic department will be hosting their signing day ceremony tomorrow in the main foyer at 8 a.m. And this will celebrate our student athletes who will be competing collegiately. And there will be another ceremony in the spring for those who have not committed yet.
Finally, on Friday, November 22nd, the Best Buddies Club at Ward will be hosting their annual Friendsgiving in the Ward cafeteria. They will also acknowledge students who have earned the Best Buddies Chapter Recognition Award.
Hello, I'm Alex Borst. Here's what's happening at WFC. We had a fun and successful Spirit Week in October. Our new morning announcement program, Wake Up Walter Fitz, scripted by students and broadcast via YouTube, is now up and running. With CAD students handling filming, the LEGO Innovation Wall is operational, allowing us to partner with LEGO Education on math, science, technology projects, including free coding software. In environmental chemistry, students are using honey from our bees to make soap, with each student taking home a bar. Thanksgiving at WFC means giving back. Thanks to Tim Kanuch and the Nutty Company, we are assembling 260 Thanksgiving bags for local families, up from 30 just 4 years ago. Our WFC Thanksgiving feast is on Wednesday, November 27th at 11:30 a.m. and you are officially invited.
Great, thank you. That sounds like a great, I'm really impressed by those numbers coming up with the last few years in terms of Thanksgiving work.
Thank you.
You are as always free to leave, free to stay. Thank you very much for your updates. Before you go, does anyone have any questions or thoughts?
Question. Typically they sell swag for Thanksgiving. Are you guys aware of any? It's one of the only times we see Ward and Ludlow on a sweatshirt. So I think some people in town are always looking out. So have you guys heard anything about swag for this Thanksgiving?
I'll have to ask the Nest for that.
Getting the information, I'm sure we'd be happy to share. It's a good day for both schools, so. But thank you, guys.
Mr. Jacobson, is there a crossword that you want to update us about?
No.
Thank you.
Field hockey score.
What's
What's the field hockey score?
no sad?
Yeah.
Oh,
Status is
no.
quite good.
Sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up.
Is number one, I believe.
What, well done getting to the
Yes.
semis. Second round. Good job. Good for our Falcons.
Thanks very much, everybody.
States.
Now we're moving on to item 4 on our agenda, public comment for our bylaws, for the welcome public comment, but it's limited to items on the agenda. So if you have a comment on item on tonight's agenda, feel free to speak for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes. Just make your name and address at the beginning so that we can. Going once, going twice. All right, seeing none, moving on to item 5, student achievement data presentation. Tony.
Yes, thank you. We've put together quite an extensive data presentation. All the departments are here to present and discuss and as well answer any questions that we have. I just want to say that many of the items, probably a good portion of next board meetings, district improvement plan will be repeated. So we can have a conversation with, or decides to just at the district improvement plan presentation to just include the items not presented tonight, rather than have to rehash and go over the same data points that are being presented tonight. So that for a later discussion. So with that, I will kick it off to Dr. Parrish. As you're all aware, Dr. Zavajancic will not be with us tonight. We'll have everyone else here to present in his absence.
Thank you, Ms. Donnie. Parrish, Deputy Superintendent. And tonight I'm joined by members of the instructional department team who will introduce themselves shortly. Tonight we have a very robust presentation for you all that includes variety of data sets, including the Smarter Balance Assessment, SAT, SAT, the Lost Links English Language Learner Assessment, the WEA and Acadian, which is our universal screeners at the district level, some course enrollment information, advanced placement results, as well as some absenteeism data. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to start the group out by just giving you an overall view of our performance on the Smarter Balance Assessment in both English and mathematics in grades 3 through 8. Our performance on the Next Gen Science Standards Assessment, which is administered in grades 5, 8, and 11, and the SAT Literacy and Math Assessment in grade 11. So starting out overall, you can see here in this chart, the SBA achievement in grades 3 through 8, and this is combined. So this is all of the grades 3 through 8 combined over the course of the last 3 years. And both math and ELA has been relatively flat. There was a slight decrease of 2% in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the benchmark at ELA, and a slight increase of 2% of that same measurement in math. In SAT, on average, the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the benchmark increased by 3% in the literacy portion of the assessment, so the evidence-based reading and writing assessment, and decreased by 8% in math. We'll go into more depth into each of these different assessments in subsequent slides. On the science NGSS assessment, the percentage of students, again, meeting or exceeding the benchmark in those grades 5, 8, and 11, which is combined here in this graph, increase. It was a very marginal increase, but an increase of 1% from last year, which is the 22-23 school year, to the 23-24 school year. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to Janine Goss, who's going to look at some more disaggregated data.
I'm Janine Goss, Executive Director, Pre-K-12 Literacy. So we're going to look at achievement data now by school on these next set of slides for Smarter Balanced in grades 3 through 8. We'll also look at grade 11 SAT as well as the Next Generation Science Standards in the tested grades of 5, 8, and 11. This first slide shows grades 3 through 5 overall achievement on the ELA Smarter Balanced Assessment in each elementary school over the last 3 years. And this shows the percentage of students who met or exceeded the benchmark. So there's a couple of things to highlight here. We did see incremental increases at McKinley and Osborne Hill over the past 3 years. We also saw a 5% increase from last year to this year at Stratfield, and a 2% increase at Burr. But as you can also see, overall schools either remained about the same or dipped in achievement.
Good evening, I'm Julie Heller, the Program Director for 612 ELA. So on this slide, the past 3 years proficiency on ELA Smarter Balance is noted at each of our middle schools. This past spring, 68% of Fairfield Woods, 76% of Roger Ludlow, and 62% of Tomlinson students demonstrated proficiency. There were decreases in proficiency at Woods and Ludlow overall, and a 5% increase at Tomlinson from 2022 to spring up. On this slide, you can see that 77% of students at Fairfield Ward and 87% of Fairfield Ludlow students demonstrated proficiency on the the school-wide SAT exam. This is an increase for both schools from the previous year.
Good evening, Nicole Danishevsky, Executive Director, Mathematics and STEM. The data here that you see on this slide provides an overview of how our elementary school students in grades 3 through 5 have performed overall during the past 3 years on the SBA math assessment. We see Dwight and Holland Hill with slight increases, while achievement remained relatively flat at Burr and McKinsey. On this slide, you have information showing the same SBA math achievement, but for students in grades 6 through 8 by school. All middle schools' math performance increased from 2023 to 2024. Fairfield Woods saw an increase of 7%, while Tomlinson saw a 9% increase in their student achievement. The data shown here represents the SAT performance of 11th graders over the past 3 years. There was a slight decrease in scores from 2023 to 2024, which was also seen across the state as well. It's important to note that this year was the first administration of the SAT online. And now Justine will share some information regarding our NGSS assessments.
Good evening, Justine LaSala, Program Director of K-12 Science and STEAM. This slide shows us data regarding the grade 5 NGSS assessment for each of our elementary schools over the past 3 years. As a reminder, the grade 5 assessment assesses students' knowledge and skills over 3 years of science learning from grade 3, 4, and 5. As you can see, performance varies by school. For example, Osborne Hill and Stratfield saw an increase in student achievement, whereas North Stratfield, Dwight, Jennings, McKinley, and Riverfield saw decreases in student achievement. In this slide, we have information regarding the results of the grade 8 NGSS assessment for our middle schools over the past 3 years. Again, this assesses 3 years of science learning from grades 6, 7, and 8. Student achievement increased across all 3 of the middle schools from 2023 to 2024. And this data finally provides us with information regarding the results of the grade 11 assessment for our high schools over the past 3 years. Same thing as we said before, it's 3 years of science learning. However, the assessment covers learning in 4 domains of science: biology, chemistry, physics, and earth science. And science achievement increased slightly for both high schools from 20.
These next few slides are going to show student achievement on the same assessments we just reviewed, but now we're going to review achievement data by grade with the addition of PSAT. For grades 3 through 5, we're looking at the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the Smarter Balanced benchmark in each grade over the last 3 years. So while grade 5 achievement remained consistent, less students in grades 3 and 4 are meeting benchmark overall.
But in looking at ELA proficiency on Smarter Balanced overall, 70% of 6th grade students, 66% of 7th grade students, and 71% of 8th demonstrated proficiency this past spring. Grades 6 and 8 remained the same or increased proficiency by 1% over the last 2 administrations, while grade 8 remained at 71%. This slide shows PSAT data for grades 9 through 11, as well as the grade 11 SAT achievement. Here you can see that 65% of grade 9 students, 73% of students in grade 10, and 77% of students in grade 11 met or exceeded benchmarks on the PSAT, while 81% of students in grade 11 met or exceeded benchmarks on the SAT.
Here on this slide, you'll see our 3-year trend data for students in grades 3 through 5 on the Math Smarter Balanced assessment. We will notice there was a slight decrease in all 3 grades, 2 to 3%. The data shown here provides an overview on how middle school students have performed on the Math SBA. There was an increase in student achievement in all 3 middle school grades from 2023 to 2024. On this slide, you will see data pertaining to how our high school students have performed on the PSAT in grades 9 through 11, SAT in grade 11. There were decreases in the data and may be attributed to the fact that this was the first year that the assessments were administered online.
NGSS achievement by grade level. This slide shows us achievement by grade level across all of our schools. Over the past 3 years, we've seen incremental improvement in both grade 8, grade 11, and NGSS proficiency levels. However, the scores for grade 5 dipped from 23.
All right, I'll jump in. So this is the subgroup analysis for each of the assessments that are listed there. We'll go through each one of them. So this is the high needs assessment broken out for the SBA, and you can see the trends over the last few years. Just to keep in mind, our students that are in the category of high needs are those that are identified as either eligible for free reduced lunch, our LML students, or those receiving special education services. So you can see that over the course of the last few years, the gap between those students that are identified as high needs and those that are not still exists, while we are starting to make some gains in the different areas within the SBA, both in math and ELA. The next slide is the actual SAT data for the same population of students. So again, our high needs students in comparison to those who are not high needs. You can see again, the gaps exist. A larger gap exists between those that are high needs and those that are not in our math scores. But again, there's been some growth over the last 3 years in math, even though from 1 year, from last year to this past school year, there was a decline. We did see an increase though on the opposite side for our high need students with respect to the ELA portion of the SAT. For the NGSS assessment, again, broken out by our high needs and non-high needs population. While there was some marginal increase over the last 3 years, statistically, I wouldn't say that it's a significant increase, but an increase nonetheless, in both populations. But again, some work to do in reference to closing the gap in addition to raising the bar. This graph, or these next series of graphs, starts to break out the Smarter Balance assessment, specifically this one around ELA by ethnicity. So you can see the different populations of students that are identified here based on the ethnicity that they identify in, excuse me. So in reference to the ELA achievement, there's still some gaps that exist between the different subgroups of our students, with our Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino students performing reaching proficiency at a lower rate than those students who identify as Asian, 2 or more races, or white. While there were some slight increases, or a slight increase from last year, 2023 to 24, in our population of students who identify as Black or African American, again, that increase was very marginal at only 1%. So this is the SAT evidence-based reading writing data, again, broken out by ethnicity. Again, you can see that although the gaps aren't as wide as they were for the SBA data that we noted on the previous slide, they do still exist with, again, our population of students who identify as Black, African American, or Hispanic Latino, having a lower rate of proficiency than those that identify in other races. We've had a huge increase that we want to highlight in our students that identify as 2 or more races, increasing from 68% in 2003 to 100% in 2004. So that's definitely something we want to celebrate and also replicate, as again, we continue to try to raise the bar and close the gap. Now we break into the math data, both for SBA in this graph and SAT in the subsequent graph, again, broken out by ethnicity, seeing similar trends in math across the various ethnicity groups, but seeing again, some slight increases in our students who identify as Asian, those who identify as 2 or more races, and those who identify as white, but seeing some slight decreases or flat, the slight increase also in those who identify as Hispanic or Latino, and a slight decrease in those who identify as Black or African American. And then this is the data for the SAT math portion. Again, seeing similar trends that we saw in our entire whole population of students, where the proficiency rates are lower than those that we see in the literacy portion of the assessment, but the gaps here are even greater between the different ethnic groups, excuse me. And we also saw some decreases across various ethnic groups with our Asian students decreasing from 87.2% to 66% in 2003 to 2004. Our Black students decreasing from 22 to 13% in the same time frame. Our Hispanic Latino students decreasing by about 3%, and our students who identify as white also decreasing by about 8%. There was an increase again in the performance of our students who identify as two or more races from 2003 to 2004. And last but not least, we have the NGSS science assessment, again, broken out by ethnicity, seeing some increases, some gains that happened over the last 3 years for our Black African American students. Again, trying to continue to trend upward, whereas the performance for our students who identify as Hispanic, Latino, two or more races, or white was relatively flat or had marginal increases. We also had an increase by almost 10%, actually over 10%, in our students who identify as Asian.
So on these next few slides, we're going to look at what we call a rough cohort analysis for growth on Smarter Balance in both ELA and NEER. This first slide shows how students did in their cohorts year after year on Smarter Balanced. So taking a look at the students that were in grade 3 in 2021, we can see that they maintained a steady increase in achievement year after year, with almost a 4% increase over the last 2 administrations of the assessment. But in contrast, grades 4, 5, and 6 grade students demonstrated a decrease in proficiency over the course of 3 years. And in particular, if you take a look at grade 5 in 2021, 22, to 6th grade to 7th grade, that cohort decreased in the percentage of students meeting proficiency by 11.3% overall. Okay, this view represents our current 9th graders as the rough cohort of students who we were tracking since the 2018-19 school year on their Smarter Balanced achievement. And for ELA, this slide shows 2 things in terms of data. One, if you take a look at the bars, that shows the percentage of our current 9th graders who were proficient on the ELA Smarter Balanced assessment when they were in grade 3, grade 5, grade 6, 7, and 8. You know what happened in grade 4, that was COVID, and so that's why we don't have data. The data also shows the average scale score for all students, and this is students who were proficient and not proficient. So students can achieve a score in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 on the Smarter Balanced assessment. There are different scale score ranges for different proficiency and that meet proficiency rather for each grade level, and that scale score increases across the years. And there is a target that students need to meet. So as you can see here, there may be a decrease in proficiency as you go through the grades, as represented by those blue bars, but there is still growth shown by that average scale score that is gradually increasing year after year. But the question is there enough growth to impact the bars there, that student achievement? So although students are increasing their scale scores, they may not be meeting all of their targets for growth.
The data presented here mimics what was presented and shared regarding ELA, looking at our rough cohorts over the past 3 years. If you focus on students from grade 6 to 7 from 2023 to 2024, we will see students' performance increasing by 5.8%. This means that the students in 6th grade in 2023 performed 5.8% better as 7th graders in 2024 on the math SBA. As we look across 3 years of data here, we see slight decreases across from 5th to 6th to 7th. The data remains flat for student achievement. The data presented here shows that over time from grades 3 through 8, our cohort of students increased their average vertical scale score by 120 points. The trend mimicked here replicates what we saw in ELA. While students' average vertical scale score has increased over time, our proficiency levels have not.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit more about growth. And we're looking at the average percent of students' growth targets in grades 4 through 8. So in other words, this shows how students did towards their individual growth targets. All the grade 3s take smarter downs. They will not have growth data until they get into fourth grade. I'm also going to share with you the average percent of target achieved by our ELML students in grades 1 through 12, as measured by the Lost Links assessment. So in ELA, there has been an overall decrease in the average percent of growth students are achieving overall. But there are some exceptions. Take a look at Sherman. Sherman students in grades 4 and 5 showed a significant increase in growth of the target that they achieved by 18%. This means that students in grades 4 and 5 at Sherman on average achieved 81% of their growth target. Burr showed a 6% increase in the percent of students' growth targets. Holland Hill increased by 4%. And there were also small increases at Stratfield as well as Osborne Hill that are also moving in the right direction.
So the data on this slide reveals the average percentage of the growth target that was achieved by all students in each middle school over the last 3 administrations of Smarter Balanced. Fairfield Woods achieved an average percentage of 53% of all students' growth targets, while Roger Ludlow demonstrated an average of 51%, and Tomlinson students demonstrated an average of 56% of all students' growth targets. In other words, on average, students are achieving about half of their growth targets. And this slide shows the same data as the 2 previous slides, but now breaks it down by grade level. What we see here is the average percentage of the growth target that was achieved by each grade level over the past 3 administrations. In grades 4 and 5, more students are achieving a higher percentage of the growth targets than students in grades 6 through 8. This represents an average, so we would assume that some students are achieving all or more of their growth targets as well.
The data on this slide provides an overview of how our elementary school students in grades 4 and 5 have made progress towards meeting their growth target. The data represented reflects students' growth targets from grades 3 to 4 and grades 4 to 5. We can see that Burr, Dwight, Mill Hill, and Osborne Hill had increases in the average percent of growth target achieved from 2023 to 2024. While Holland Hill, Jennings, and Sherman's remained flat. This slide shows the growth data for our middle school students over the past 3 years. The graphs show that the average percent of target achieved has remained flat at Fairfield Woods, with a slight decline at Roger Ludlow Middle School and Tomlinson. On this slide, you will see our average percent of growth target achieved by grade over time. Students in grade 5 and 6 saw an increase in their rates from 2023 to 2024.
Now we're shifting to the Lost Links assessment. This is an assessment that our English learners, multilingual learners take once a year. The percent of target achieved is a really important data point to monitor, especially for this population, because we're focusing on growth and not necessarily right away on achievement, because students are learning English during the first few years. So in this assessment, there is a reading and writing component, which makes up the literacy component that you see on the left. And then there's a speaking and listening component that makes up the oral subtest. So here you see students in grades 1 through 12 and the literacy percentage of target they achieved, which has significantly increased from 2023 to 2024, going from 62% to 71%. On the right, you see the students' percent of target achieved for that oral component, which had a small increase when students took the test 2023 to 2024. This next slide shows the percentage of target students achieved for reading and writing that make up the literacy part of the test. And this view is broken down now by levels. So in grades 1 through 5, students overall met on the average 77% of their targets when they took the Lost Links test in January of 2024. That's represented by the. While in grades 6 through 8, on the average, they achieved 69% of their target. And finally, at the high school, we see a nice steady increase in the percent of target achieved in the literacy component of the assessment. And likewise, for the component of the Lost Links for speaking and listening, which makes up the oral test, we see the average percentage of the target students achieved at these different levels. So there was a significant increase in the percentage of target students achieved at the middle schools over the last 2 administrations. We saw a modest increase at the high school level, but grades 1 through 5 is seeing a steady decrease. So these next slides are going to show how students performed on our district NWEA MAP screener in grades 3 through 9 in ELA and math. NWEA has 3 subtests: reading, language usage, and math, that measures achievement and growth over time. The other thing we should know about NWEA is that it's an assessment that can predict how students will do on the Smarter Balanced assessment in grades 8. So teachers can see where students are currently. They can plan for instruction to target areas that students need to further develop. So this first slide shows student performance for all subtests of NWEA in reading, math, and language usage. Students take NWEA reading and language usage beginning in 4th grade, and K through 9 students take the math subtests. So we're sharing the percent of students who performed at or above the 61st percentile during last year's administrations in the fall, winter, and spring, as well as when we administered all 3 subtests this fall. So I want to explain that a little bit, because the 41st, the 60th percentile is considered to be in the average range. But in order to meet proficiency on Smarter Balanced, a student would actually need to perform in that 61st and above percentile of NWEA. That's the correlation. So that's why you're seeing here that the numbers represent students who met proficiency at the 61st percentile or above. So the reading subtest measures reading comprehension and vocabulary, and the percentage of students by grade level who scored at or above that 61st percentile are shown here throughout last year, as well as when we administered it this fall. 5 of the 6 grade levels here decreased in achievement last year from fall to spring. The only exception was grade 4, who demonstrated a 1% increase in proficiency from fall to spring. Now we're going to look at how grades 4 and 5 students did on the reading subtest in each elementary school. Some schools demonstrated an increase in the percentage of students who achieved at or above that 61st percentile, such as Wright and Jennings. There was a decrease in proficiency at percentile and above in other elementary schools when we looked from fall to spring. And similarly, in grades 6 through 8, we saw a downward trend from fall to spring last year. And similar scenario is indicated here for both high schools in grade 9 for NWEA reading. High schools take the NWEA reading. They do not take the language usage. Okay, so this slide shows how NWEA has helped us predict student proficiency on Smarter Balanced. The bars represent the Smarter Balanced proficiency projection in the fall, winter, and spring. So if you draw your attention to the medium blue colored bar, which is in the middle, that represents the student proficiency projection in the winter of 2024. And then we see how students actually performed on the summative assessment in the spring, as indicated right above that bar. So for example, 70% of grades 4 through 8 students overall were projected to meet proficiency on Smarter Balanced this past spring, and 71% did demonstrate proficiency. So NWEA was pretty spot on in terms of projection in each grade level, as well as if you look at the percentage projected to be proficient, bottom of that middle bar, and then the corresponding percentage who were actually proficient at the top. The second subtest students taking grades 4 to 8 is language usage, and that measures writing, writing. And grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 increased by 2 to 7 percentage points for students who performed at or above that 61st percentile. I'm looking from fall to spring on NWEA language usage. Grade 4 demonstrated a 2% slight decrease from fall to winter. But all grades, with the exception of grade 8, started this year off either at the same or greater percentage of students performing at or above that 61st percentile. Now, this slide shows the same data, but it's broken down by grade level. Yes, broken down by grade level. Next one. So the next one is actually a duplicate in your packet. So we're going to disregard that. Move on to the next one. Grades 6, 7, and 8 all increased in the percentage of students who performed at or above that 61st percentile from fall to spring last year, from 2 to 6%. All 3 grades performed about the same this fall that they did last year as well.
And on this slide shows our students' performance on the district NWEA benchmark assessment in mathematics. Last year's students in grades 3 through 8 demonstrated improvements in proficiency from fall to winter to spring. Students are performing at similar or higher levels on the fall assessment as compared to last year's fall results. Grade 2 is the exception. Here you will see the performance by elementary school on the NWEA administration. You will notice that Dwight, Holland Hill, Jennings, McKinley, Osborne Hill, and Sherman all saw over 10% increase in student proficiency last year from the fall to spring NWEA administration. We see similar trends by the middle schools in relation to growth throughout the year from fall to spring. Fairfield Woods and Roger Ludlow Middle School maintained their spring performance proficiency this fall, and all 3 middle schools are beginning the year with higher percentages of students proficient on the fall NWEA math map assessment as compared to last year. As you saw on the ELA slide, this graph shows how our students performed by grade on the NWEA assessment in relation to actual proficiency achieved on the Smarter Balanced Math assessment. The spring assessment appears to be more predictive of student performance in the area of mathematics. You will notice that grade 8 has been removed from this slide since students completed the assessment that was aligned to their enrolled course for NWEA. This has since been rectified, and all students moving forward will be completing the same assessment from grades 3 through 9.
Okay, these next few slides are going to show data for our K3 repeat screener that is administered 3 times a year. This is our 2nd year using these measures to determine if students are on track to reach subsequent reading benchmarks. So this first slide shows the overall composite score for Acadians for our K3 students last year, fall to spring. And this fall, where 81% of our K3 students met the grade level benchmark, and they are on track to reach future reading benchmarks with effective core instruction. This next slide breaks down the same composite score data, but by grade level. You'll notice a general increase in the percentage of students meeting the grade level benchmark from fall to spring. And it's also now a good time to highlight that one of the key performance indicators from our district improvement plan is to ensure that all grade 2 students complete second grade reading at or above grade level as measured by this district screener. The metric we use is the Acadians composite score, where you can see 84% of students met proficiency in the spring, and this percentage is maintained this fall. We're going to monitor this trend. It would need to achieve an incremental increase of about 5.3% each year in order to meet our goal by spring of 2027. Finally, this same reading composite data is now shared with you here by school for students in grades K through 3. Significant increase was demonstrated from fall to spring last year at McKinley. And McKinley is starting the year off in a better place overall with that 74%, which means there are 74% of students at benchmark at the beginning of the year. Other schools that showed increases from last year from fall to spring were at 7%. White had a slight 1% increase. Collins Hill had an 11% increase. Stratfield 13%. We have other schools starting the year off with a higher percentage as well, at or above benchmark at Stratfield and Jennings.
Lisa Oliveira, Director of Social Studies. The next set of 3 slides will illustrate data on exam scores as well as enrollment by subgroup on honors and honors AP courses. This chart shows AP data from 2022 to 2024. In the first row, we see an increase in the number of students who took AP exams. In 2022, 708 Fairfield Public School students took AP exams, while in 2024, 851 FPS students took AP exams. The average number of exams each AP student takes or took was 2, as indicated in the 4th row. Scores on AP exams range from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest score and 5 being the highest. The College Board considers a passing grade of 3 or higher. You'll notice on this chart that there was an increase in the number of students who earned a passing grade of 3 or above. In 2022, it was 604 students, while in 2024, it was 722 students. In addition, and as indicated in the bottom row in red, the average score on AP exams for Fairfield Public School students improved from 3.54 in 2022 to 3.60 in 2024. This slide indicates participation in honors AP and non-honors courses by race and ethnicity. African American, Asian, white, Latino, and 2 or more races are represented across the top row in blue. The bottom row, featured in red, indicates the percent of the overall student population of each group. African American students comprise 4% of the student population, Asian Americans nearly 7%, white nearly 70%, Latino nearly 15%, and students who identify as 2 or more races make up 4.61% of the student population. Therefore, the percent of students in each course, whether it's non-honors or honors AP, should be similar or proportional to the overall population. You'll note that white students represent 70% of the student population, and we see that proportion roughly represented in 4 areas. Asian American students of 2 or more races are more highly represented in all 4 content areas. African American and Latino students are underrepresented in honors AP and overrepresented in non-honors courses. This slide provides similar subgroup information on participation in honors AP and non-honors courses. However, rather than providing proportional data of the total student population, it shows what percentage of each subgroup of students are enrolled in either honors or non-honors courses. Please note on this slide, data on non-special education, special education, non-high needs, and high needs students are also provided. For example, if we look at the last row of high needs students, we see that all 4 core content areas are between 23 and 36% of students that are enrolled in honors and AP courses, while It serves between 63 and 76% of students enrolled in non-honors courses.
So this last segment is the chronic absenteeism data, which is a part of our district improvement plan. It's one of our goals. Chronic absenteeism is defined as any absence resulting in missing 10% or more of the total number of days that have taken place to that date, that point in time. One of our district improvement plan goals is to reduce chronic absenteeism for all groups of students to 5% by 2027. So this slide shows our chronic absenteeism across our elementary schools, and almost all of our elementary schools, except for one, ended the 23-24 school year with decreases in their chronic absenteeism rates, some of which had significant decreases, including Dwight, McKinley, North Stratfield, Riverfield, and Sherman, as noted in the slide provided. There were similar trends and decreases seen in the chronic absenteeism across our 3 middle schools, with the absenteeism rate dropping at Woods by almost 50% from one year to the next. Lastly, we also saw decreases in our chronic absenteeism rates across our 2 comprehensive high schools. As noted there, decreases over the course of the last 3 years, continued declines, which represents increased engagement and student attendance. This last slide shows the breakdown of the different categories of students across our district for the last 3 years, and also includes a data set for the current school year as of November 6th. So as you can see, the overall chronic absenteeism rate decreased in the 23-24 school year from the previous school year by 2.5% for all students, with decreases in every single subcategory of students across the district. These decreases meet our yearly district improvement plan goal of 2.5% decreases per year across all categories. As I mentioned, the data is provided for the current school year as of November 6th, but please note that because it is a moving target at that point in time, for approximately 40 days of school, so anyone with 4 absences or more would end up being considered chronically absent. And so this number will continue to change as the number of school years, or school days, I should say, in the school year continue to add up and the school year progresses.
So Nicole and I are going to share some very broad steps as we respond to the need for greater growth and achievement here in Fairfield. And then Dr. Parrish will talk about next steps for chronic absenteeism. So the first bullet talks about the fact that we continue to monitor and revise our implementation practices in our core curriculum areas. We know social studies is at the very beginning stages of the curriculum review cycle. While in math, science, and ELA, we continue to monitor and revise implementation guides that do include those common assessments and learning plans, which outline those assured experiences for students attached to the learning goals and those end of summative assessments. So in addition to the development of the new social studies curricula, the team is working with Lisa to design AP programming that's aligned with the College Board's courses and exams. I also wanted to mention that last year, district professional development really focused on what high quality instruction looks like, what it sounds like, what it looks like for teachers, what will students be doing. And this year we're working to utilize the high quality instructional practices to minimize the variability across the organization. So we want to minimize the inconsistencies that may occur across our classrooms with curricula implementation and improve student learning experiences so that our students are working at grade level, on grade level tasks, text, using grade level resources, and that their students are really doing the heavy cognitive work. And in thinking about reducing that variation of instructional practices, we are working more closely together across content areas to really highlight and support those similar practices that we can elevate, that can be effectively utilized. We recently engaged both social studies and ELA teachers, for example, and the math and science teachers at the middle school level to support them with strategies to support our diverse learners, particularly our ELML learners. So this way they are participating almost 100% of the time in that core instruction with proper scaffolding. I referenced the common assessments a little bit earlier, but we continue to examine whether those assessments are providing us the useful information we need in order to make changes to our instructional practices. We monitor teacher feedback. We make changes as needed, especially with ELA, since that is our very first crack at it this year, right? We're implementing this year for the first time because we want to be able to respond to students appropriately. And finally, a district improvement plan action step is the development of an MTSS framework that stands for multi-tiered systems of support. And we have established a pre-K-12 committee that started working. This is a committee of principals, assistant principals. We have literacy and math specialists. We have psychologists, social workers, interventionists, BCBAs, to name just a few. This is a general ed initiative, and we are working to refine our current SRBI practices, which focus very much on academics. And now we are also looping in behavioral, social, emotional learning, as well as attendance in this multi-tiered support system. This framework is going to provide direction and consistency across our schools and to support our principals and to support our school teams.
In regards to future professional learning opportunities, we continue to utilize and rely on research to guide our work related to high quality instruction. We've recently been learning about differentiation and how to best meet the diverse needs of our students by continuing to ensure they are working and accessing grade level content. To further build upon this work, we are linking the research and our professional learning opportunities to walk through protocols for all district administrators in order to help support high quality instructional practices by tying it to our new evaluation plan that is being rolled out this year. In addition, there is a lot of targeted professional learning through each of our departments, depending on which stage of our curriculum review cycle each discipline is in.
Lastly, there are a number of steps that are being taken across the district, both at the district level and at the school level, in supporting the reduction of chronic absenteeism across the board. Our school-based attendance teams meet regularly. They discuss trends that they notice across grade levels, across populations of students, discussing individual student cases. In some instances, they meet with the students and or their families to develop action plans to help re-engage them into coming back to school, figure out what supports those individual students may need, but also connecting their families as needed with supports that may be available within the community. We start every year, November 1st, sending out our chronic absenteeism letter. This is a letter that has been revised over the last couple of years. It now includes not only data about that individual student, but also students in that grade level within the school, so that parents have some idea of how their students' absenteeism is in comparison to their peers, both within that grade level and at that particular school. As you all know, we also created an attendance handbook. That handbook is available for all parents. We took the policy and crafted a very parent-friendly graphic that explains very explicitly how absenteeism works and how attendance works. And so that is included in that handbook. That's also provided in the staff version that provides them with some additional resources to support their school teams during those attendance meetings. And then last but not least, we are continuing our district communications in terms of utilizing both Parent Square and our newsletters to really just provide periodic reminders and stress the importance of students coming to school every day when possible. And so with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation and for coming out tonight to speak with us about such a deep and comprehensive look at student achievement. It's very valuable. Questions, Mr. Krasnov?
Thank you.
Thank you for all this information. It is a lot of information, so I'm sure there's a lot to look through. My big question is, how do you take this information? What key indicators do you look at? For example, I saw a few places where there were like 20% dips in specific schools, specific categories, kind of flag that and what maybe caused that, see if there's any correlations. Because I would love to know we're using this data. It's good to have it, but I want to make sure maybe I'll elaborate a little bit how we use the data.
I'll say on a broad level, all schools create their own school improvement plans utilizing their school-specific data, and their goals are aligned to the goals that we have identified in the district improvement plan. Looking exactly at that, are there subpopulations of students that are performing worse than they did previously? Are they noticing trends over the course of the years? Is this a curriculum issue or an instructional issue? And what can we do about it at the school in terms of meeting the needs of the teachers to support the needs of the students? And so I'll turn it over to our department. Add to that.
We have a lot to. So first and foremost, thank you for approving curriculum, because I think this was making sure we have a guaranteed curriculum is a very first step, right? But truthfully, I'll speak for K-5 right now. We are investing in our human resources. That's where our efforts are right now. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a couple of examples. We have a central elementary leadership team that works with me. There's about 6 of us who monitor the implementation of our literacy plan. 5 priority goals. We have action steps within each of those goals. But we do the planning for the district, and then we work with our elementary principals and APs, as well as our central office team, participate in professional learning, and then monitor the implementation from that level. And they help to make decisions moving forward in terms of what's next to support staff. Our coaches, our language arts specialist coaches are front and center through this whole large scale change. They're receiving professional learning on coaching. They're also participating in a lot of decision making as well for planning and implementation, and we adjust constantly. We also have elementary school-based literacy teams. This is something new this year. They always had literacy teams, but this time they're focusing on literacy agenda items, again, to monitor the implementation of how things are going and to make some recommendations. It's a really good communication tool to make sure that things are not being done to them. They are there making decisions, things alongside us. Our interventionists are constantly receiving, every single month, they're receiving professional learning around tiered intervention programming. Our ELML teachers at the elementary level are working with an expert consultant in the field to help them utilize these new HMH resources, our primary tools, to try to help with the push in and pull out model as well. Most importantly, our teachers, there is intentional PD planned for them to support them throughout the year. We use our Tuesday department meetings. Our principals are using their faculty meetings, their building-based time as well. We have HMH coaches in our buildings, so it's job-embedded PD, and they are working alongside of our teachers, our coaches, our principals and assistant principals. We're up to our 3rd session next week with the HMH coaches. We have 3 more planned for the second half of the year. And I'm also offering science of reading workshops after school once a month for those that want to volunteer to come. It's virtual. It's not a tough commitment because we understand they're going to pick up their children from sports or whatever, and they can just listen and have that on in the background. And, we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that we're filling everybody's buckets with everything that they need, and we're taking their feedback. There are other deliberate structures that are in place, but I did want to highlight how we're investing in our human resources because that really is key.
David, to your question, I think it was a fair question. One of the first meetings that I had in entering the district 2 years ago, many of the teachers at the meeting talked about the lack of data that was available to them. After many of the assessments that the district gave, they would enter the data into a portal or a spreadsheet, and that was the end of it. So one of the commitments that we've had is to provide teachers with data and principals. We have our data our data assessment coordinator who goes out, meets with teachers, meets with principals to not only provide the data, explain the data, but also answer questions and break down the data. I think it's been eye-opening for a lot of people in terms of knowing where their kids are, the growth that's happening within their classroom throughout the year. Because a lot of the narrative that I would get is that we're fine. They really had nothing to point to know if their kids were actually growing and achieving. I think now that you can see, we've provided a whole host of this information, not only for the board, but this does trickle down to the classroom teachers.
Are we able to identify what's causing the 20% increases in some cases or the 20% decreases? Like, is it helping identify stuff, or is right now, is it, we're still trying to learn from the data because it's just coming in?
No, I do think it's helping significantly. I also think that, you know, some of our assessments, as was mentioned, last year was the first year as of NWEA. Teachers were getting acclimated to the administration of the assessment, also how to look at the information that it was providing. So I think in year 2 now, we've got a better handle. I think they're more comfortable. It was a big shift for them. In addition, as Janine mentioned, the Acadians is our new screener over the last couple of years. They're more comfortable in what the data is telling them. So I do think it's extremely helpful. But I also think that, you know, it's a work in progress as we continue to get that information, analyze it, and make adjustments to instruction based on the information, and not just continue to do the same old, hoping that things are going to result differently. So I think the team here did a phenomenal job in putting together the presentation. It's very in-depth. It's very detailed. I know that some of the principals have provided some of the data in their meetings at the beginning of the school year with their faculties. And there was some eye-opening, reactions by the staff in terms of why certain adjustments to processes and protocols were being put in place because they didn't know. So I think awareness is the first step to make change.
It's a little bit of a follow-up. This is kind of specifically to Ms. Goss. In terms of ELA, to Mr. Testani's point, we are seeing new assessments, new maps, new things coming home, new things for teachers. Have you seen any like tall trees in your data that has caused like a pivot in professional learning? Are you seeing that there's a larger need in an area that maybe you were like, oh my goodness, we're kind of running into January. So I think it's a great time to kind of say, this is something we weren't expecting. And here it is right before you in the data.
Yeah. So we have a very intentional plan for professional learning because we feel like, this happens once every 10 years. And we really need to level the playing field, and we really need to make sure that we go in depth. And so our choice was to take our literacy block that's broken up into 4 components and concentrate on one component at a time and go really in depth. So from September through December, we're focusing on the vocabulary reading component, which is 30 minutes of the 120-minute block. And what came from that was the development of what we call look-fors. These are indicators. These are practical ways that we can think about what does it look like, what does it sound like, what are teachers doing, what are students doing, and it's calibrating everybody. That calibration is really, really critical when you're trying to implement a guaranteed curriculum. That consistency is important. The other thing in terms of your question about what do we do with this data, and I've mentioned it maybe once or twice, we're really looking at growth. What might be happening is that students are progressing. No doubt, students are progressing, but they may not be progressing enough to close the gaps. And so one of the things we have to make sure as we think about the vocab and reading, for example, is that students are working at grade level. Because what happens is, if year after year, students do not work at grade level, not reading grade level text and not engaging in grade level tasks and being asked to do the cognitive work that grade level standards require, that gap grows and you can't get caught up. Yeah. And so that's something we're looking at very closely. And that is an expectation of what we do during our core instruction. It doesn't mean we can't provide a scaffold to give students an entry point. But that growth piece is very important, and that's what I got from the data, that we really need to concentrate on. How do we help all students grow?
Grade level piece is critical because she's mentioned it a few times. A little over a year and a half ago, our first PD with the administrative team, one of the questions to all the administrators in this room was to give a percentage of how much time kids are accessing grade level material throughout the day. And the range, if everyone remembers, around the room ranged from the low 10-15% all the way up to 90%. So there was some variance as to what people's perception of in their buildings, kids were accessing grade level material and doing grade level tasks. So we've been working extensively to make sure that all kids, all the time, are accessing grade level content, grade level material, and are asked to do grade level tasks. And I think that's been a major shift over the last year plus.
Mr. Lee.
So going on a couple things here, I've noticed we have, the state obviously also has a huge tip too, for actually outperforming the state. My concern is, especially in the high school level, especially when we're seeing the SAT and the math scores have dipped a lot. That's obviously a reflection of what they're doing in elementary school, scores dipped. Talk about not being able to catch up. So on that high school level, to prepare them for that next level. We're offering the right courses to help them catch up, or like, you know, my daughter, but she's not the smartest in math, and in high school you were able to, right, not pick the hardest math classes, but the classes that meant to graduate. Doesn't necessarily mean she caught up, but it means that she graduated and you hope she's ready for that next level. We offering too much where the kids are now to just circumnavigate how to get better in math, stuff they actually need for the SATs, because the SATs are coming back, right? To prepare them for that next level.
So in the area of mathematics, as we have rolled out last year and this year, the PAP as our instructional framework, we are, part of our work, it's integrating SAT style types of questions into our instruction as well as our assessments. Most students are entering high school in Algebra 1. Some are geometry and Algebra 2, depending upon what their sequence. The SAT does include content through Algebra 2, which some students will take during their junior year if they follow Algebra, Geometry, Algebra 2 as their sequence. We have some professional, we have the College Board Rep coming in our content areas in December to work with our AP teachers, as well as working with the math teachers on supporting the implementation with the pre-AP, looking at our data and using it to help us make some of those adjustments.
As a quick follow-up, is it safe to assume that a lot of this also is because these are the generation of the COVID years where we had difficulties, whether it's in classroom, online, whatever, but just to get back into the groove of things? If we didn't have like that COVID years, you see it dipping how Fairfield used to perform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a piece of it. I also think it was an online administration. When you look across the state, there were decreases and declines in math. So what is it that's included and embedded? So the Desmos calculator. So we've been doing some work over the course of last year, with our students, so that they know how to access the calculator that's embedded on the SAT in order to answer. So I think some test taking strategies, some skills, that vocabulary and language, looking at taking the time to have those conversations, put up a question in your classroom and talk through that with a student. How would you attack this particular kind of question or style of question? There are some things we can do to help the students, I think, be a little more efficient in that testing.
We also want to make sure we're sending our students from the elementary level to the middle to the high school greater funds of knowledge. That is something that we all agreed we needed to focus on. High leverage.
Scusi?
Yes, just in terms of thank you so much for this. I mean, so much to celebrate, still some work to do, but this is fantastic information. And just wondering, when we're talking about the students that are participating in these tests, what percentage are we talking, especially at the high school level with the PSAT and SAT that are participating in this?
I don't know the exact percentage but I would say most of our students are taking PSAT. And, there are some that decide to opt out, but I would have to get back to you with the exact number of students that are in the PSAT and SAT each year.
Yeah, and the exact number isn't important to me. I just wondering in general, like an idea of the percentage, and then what are the demographics of those students, right? Because those are tests that are given on specific days, so we have less flexibility, and I'm just trying to figure out how to interpret the data there.
I think it's a pretty high percentage though, because there hasn't been any mention. I know Dr. Hatsis is here. Of any concerns that there's a lot of kids not participating, no, right? We've had that, Montessori and Mr. Brown mentioned this high number of kids last year. Trying to find the space in the gymnasium and make sure that there's enough bandwidth for them to participate.
Sure, and in terms of the Desmos calculator, these ideas that there are these online components now that the students have to grapple with. I can't remember who was mentioning that the scores are possibly lower because it's digital. I'm just wondering, I mean, I didn't know that that was a national trend, so I'm trying to interpret like what's going on here versus in the nation.
Well, I know
The access to the
there was a decline.
system with the state decline. Okay.
But in our DIRG, when we look at DIRG performances across similar districts for math.
And then the other comment I just wanted to make, like on page 68, here's another place too. We're talking about breaking down honors AP and non-honors. And I just wanted to make sure that at some point, if it doesn't show up here, it would be in the next presentation, that we break it down by honors and AP, because we have goals around students accessing specifically those AP classes. So, I mean, I'm interested in better understanding that and how it fits into their participation by race and ethnicity specifically.
We can get that to you in the next Friday back.
Thank you. Great. Thanks so much.
On page 14, the science achievement, grade 5. I believe you did touch a little bit on this when you did your science presentation. Is this due to the type of test? Changes, because I remember you mentioned something like that, or are we not able to do enough science to get this stuff to go up like that?
Are you talking about, you're referencing grade 5?
The grade 5 one, it's actually
Okay.
13th slide, I believe.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things going on with elementary. I think, well, I'll tell you again, and I'm gonna answer your first question was how are we using the data? After looking at that data, I set up meetings with all the elementary principals to kind of discuss the state of science in their buildings. Some buildings are doing really well, and I'm thinking there's strategies that they're using, and there's something using that we can share out with the other buildings. And also talking to the buildings that aren't doing as well as we'd like them to do. Talking to them about the schedule, how the schedule is playing out. As you know, there's a lot of constraints on the day. I also have, we have a material science center where we have bins that we send to the buildings. So I can actually see where the materials are being used and where they're not being used. So that will obviously impact students. I think also, just from my initial tours with principals this year, one thing that I'm recognizing is and it's actually the lowest hanging fruit, is to focus on test administration. So there seems to be some inconsistencies around test administration, how it's playing out in the buildings with the kids. And their familiarity with the test platform. We're rolling out the use of interim assessments in every unit of grades 4 and 5 to get kids more used to using that assessment system. So So I think that there's a lot of things going on there. I think also the past 2 years, we've been very ELA focused. So, you know, it's hard again on this one classroom teacher. There, you know, it's a lot of things to work on.
I appreciate that. I would one of the charts.
So thank you for this, bunch of questions. Just, I want to do an immediate follow-up on the science. When you talk about the, you know, the test platform, obviously I have to believe part of it is content, that we could do something content. Do you see this, what we're getting here for results impacting their STEAM time at all? You know, because obviously in addition to what the classroom teacher is doing, the vast majority of whom probably did not become elementary school teachers because of their love of science, I'm just going to guess. So therefore, but we do have that, you know, the commitment and investment in the STEAM teacher. Do you see the curriculum that's there maybe being able to be, you know, tweaked or whatever those activities are to better support the science curriculum?
So there's a lot of things that I've been working on this year to continue to talk about that. So we had already been addressing some of the end science standards in STEAM, right? When we designed the STEAM program, we intentionally picked up all the engineering pieces because also that's the heaviest, it's time consuming to give students that opportunity for design and redesign. So we purposely put all that into the STEAM program. This summer, I worked with grade 4 and 5 teams of teachers plus STEAM teachers to look across the science and STEAM curriculum and streamline and coordinate. So we're kind of strengthening those connections. I also am working on using the STEAM teachers to try and leverage them to be the science champions in their buildings. We really need science champions in buildings to again, classroom teachers have a lot on their plate. We really need science champions to really promote science, to be there as a resource for the teachers. So my STEAM teachers are working really hard to answer curricular questions, making sure that they have the information that they need. I'd like to next year, hopefully, leverage them to start providing science-focused PD in the buildings, if possible, at some point. We've been working, for example, I'll give you one very specific example. Last year, grade 5 had 4 units. And again, it's really hard to get it all in with time constraints on the schedule. We picked up some of the content from one of those units and put it into our STEAM program. And so now they only have 3 for grade 5. But again, we still need a consistent commitment to science on top of that in the classroom as well, because the STEAM program doesn't happen enough in order to get it all done.
Okay, thank you. Couple of other, well, I have several other questions. One thing, and I don't know if anyone on the board remembers this, I thought I asked at last year's data presentation that we have a string for the 2018-19 data, because that's pre-COVID, that's where we were. We still have no sense of how we are catching up or not on where we were as a district prior. Now, obviously, some of the assessments have changed. You know, obviously, right off the bat, SAT is different, and absolutely different format has impacted scores. You know, and they're going to get used to it. But is that something that, again, just putting out there, I know I asked for it at some point. I thought it was in last year's data presentation. But if that would at least be examined or looked at, or, you know, anything, any kind of data piece, just to let us know, have we caught up? Have we not? Where are we with this? If there's data that is relevant, obviously, if it were based on 2 different tests, you know, maybe that's not useful. But, you know, I do think it would be an important barometer for us to know of, are we back?
I mean, we could, I don't know if it really tells us if we're back or not, because it's different kids. And I also think, and because we did a little bit of, well, I did a little bit, and I know I shared with the board when we were talking about redistricting, because the question came up a few times, or the comment, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time, and how don't people know? Well, there's a significant number of people that entered Fairfield from other places. And I don't mean kindergarten and first grade, because their kids just became of age since the pandemic. I mean, thousands of kids. So I don't even know if that's even something we want to get into, because if I entered Fairfield in 8th grade and I came from somewhere else, I don't know if they were exposed to the same instructional practices as a child that was here since kindergarten. I think that might be a little tricky as well, so.
So to be clear, it's the opinion of the district that that kind of a look isn't useful. I'm not criticizing it,
No.
I'm genuinely asking.
I don't know what we would do with it. I think the growth data, as we look at the cohort data, is much more useful to us to see if kids are growing and what rate they're growing or not growing, and try to figure out why, then go back to a group of kids who tested back in 2018. And
Right, but I'm only, every year we're looking at data, it's a new set of kids. So when we look at 5th grade one year and then we look at 5th grade the next year, that's always one of the problems of, sure, we might see a dip or a rise, but it's a completely different set of kids
Correct.
who's achieving that. We always have to factor
that's
that
why
in.
the growth data and the cohort data is what's really important.
Right, I agree about, especially about the growth data. I especially agree about the cohort data. I'll admit, I don't fully get the growth data. I don't have to deal with that, so I'll take your word on that one.
Interject very quickly. I wonder, would it be relevant for us to see the data relative to the 18-19 state averages and see what the delta is?
Sure.
You see something like if
could do
we're
that.
doing better versus the state averages.
Then and now,
than
yeah,
pre-COVID.
gotcha.
Because it's just a large
Okay.
aggregation of kids.
Yeah.
I mean, with that,
Again, I don't want to ask anyone to do anything that's not actually going to be
No, we can do
useful,
it.
but I think having that sense of, hey, we're back, we're moving ahead. It's, I think, almost kind of a mental, are we still dealing with COVID repercussions, or no, we're back where we were? Okay, well, you know what I think, but I'm curious with the SAT, and as we look at, we have a data coordinator, obviously, but with the SAT, a significant change is losing all those sub scores. And you talk about the College Board people coming to town. Are they able to provide you with anything useful beyond just that one score now? Because it used to be really helpful to have all those sub scores. Still don't quite get why that was done away with, but is that anything you're able to get access to? I'm not sure to whom I'm actually directing this.
I'll ask the contact and see what we're able to do. I know from my sign in, I was able to answer some very specific questions based upon standards and topics, easy, medium, and hard to kind of pull from and create.
So it used to be like the heart of algebra, and I can't remember any of the other math ones.
And probably the statistics.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because I remember statistics as being an area that was, before your tenure, was identified as, that's an area we need to work on. And that's what I mean when I say those sub-scores were very helpful. But, okay. One thing I'm kind of curious about, and I'm presenting this neutrally, but usually we come out of this with something that we're celebrating. And this felt, and I don't want to take anything away from, I have no doubt people are working incredibly hard. But I was wondering if there's a piece that any of you maybe individually would say, that is a point I would celebrate, and here's what we did to achieve that. I come away from this data presentation with none of that. I mean, obviously, I think we're all really looking forward to, no pressure, Ms. Goss, but in 1 year, what has this literacy work done for next year's scores? And right now it's simply way too early. But from these, I got no celebratory sense. And I was wondering if there's something anybody would,
Well, the first
except
thing,
the absenteeism.
yeah, I was just gonna say, the
Yeah,
first
no,
thing.
I'll give you that one.
Clear
I'll
as
give you that
day,
one.
Chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
Is a huge, across every subgroup, across every school. And I think that was a very intentional focus. We made some, I think, high leverage moves, and collectively as a district have seen huge growth.
Can I have one from the academics?
Sure.
And I completely agree. I
We
should
have
have.
5 schools of distinction that we'll talk about later. I think, and all for.
From this.
Well, that's what's there. Tomlinson made some huge gains. Stratfield made some huge gains. Sherman. I mean, there are a lot of good things. I think everybody mentioned and highlighted those. And I think there's opportunities that I think we'll see even further. I mean, our high schools in subgroups made some big gains as well. I think Carol said there's so much to celebrate. I think it's hard not to.
I guess what I'm I definitely want to hear this. What I react with is that the presentation finishes and I don't feel that. I love the fact that you jumped right into the bragging. That I just wanted to give you a chance to brag about something you did in your disciplines, that this was something there. And again, what I'm interested in is the intentional effort resulting in then the success that you intended. And I'd just love to hear a couple stories of that.
Sure.
You're gonna go?
I'll jump in.
Fight for it.
I will fight for it. Math and science will go. On slide 11 to continue Mr. Testani's comment. I mean, as we look there, Tomlinson went from 52% of their students in math, 6th through 8th grade, being proficient on Smarter Balance to 61%. Fairfield Woods went from 57% to 64%. Roger Ludlow had a slight increase, 72 to 75. That's a celebration that in the area of mathematics, we were able to move the needle in middle school. And that was attributed the MRTs. We worked with our data assessment coordinator last year. We integrated IABs. I ensured that kids had at least 4 opportunities over the course of the year that were written into our course pacing for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then in addition to that, we looked at the data when we had NWEA, when we gave an IAB in our department meeting and professional learning time, and we were very thoughtful and purposeful. We looked at the data reactively to be reflective, and we tried to look at past data from previous years proactively in anticipation of misconceptions, challenges, opportunities for growth, and we designed professional learning. We had teachers looking not only at the data like this, but specific student level data and identifying who were the students who were at level 2. What were their characteristics? How close were they? How did they grow from point A to point B? We also did some work around common assessments, which we are rolling out this year. And then another math celebration. As a district, we went from 67 to 69% of our students being proficient. That's a 2% increase in grades 3 through 8. Almost at our district improvement, what our goal is. Our goal is supposed to get to 71. So we're gonna get there. But that's, I think, 2 celebrations right there in the area of mathematics that I personally am proud of, having come in last year, working with that team of teachers and the MRTs. And I have to say the administrators, the building administrators were on board, supportive of the work that I was doing with the department. And that really made the difference. We were one cohesive team from central office to the buildings down to the classroom teachers.
And I'll give you one department that's probably not spoken of much is our ML department. Our lost link scores have shot through the roof. And that was because of intentional changes in how we program and how we support students. So both at the elementary, middle, and especially at the high school level, there was cosmic shifts in how we support those students. And you saw immediate results because of it. And I think you're going to continue to see those numbers grow as time goes on, even as more students enter the district.
I will say for Tomlinson specifically around math, and I'm sorry, I just want to celebrate them specifically because they did focus on math to your question earlier around school improvement plans and looking at specific data. I know it was not a popular comment when we made it here in reference to our use of IXL, but they purposely last year used IXL in a targeted way. And because of the growth that they saw in math, that's what led the other 2 middle schools to look at the use of IXL and Flex and say, this may be an opportunity for us to also provide that individualized support for students in the area that they need it and within math. And so that's where that change came from, was out of this small school improvement plan strategy that Tomlin wanted to implement last year, that they saw a significant, it was a 9% increase across, the 3 grades for that school. Something for them to celebrate, and they did celebrate it and highlight it with the other two schools. And that was one of the reasons why, as we continue to morph and change the way in which we utilize Flex, that 30 minutes, once a week on IXL was where that came from, because of the work that they were doing in support of their student growth.
Thank you. I just have one other big question, at least for right now. And if I cut anybody off who still wanted to brag, please.
Science wanted to brag. I cut her off.
I just want to say, when I started here, I was just secondary and I started right around COVID time. But for the past 3 years, I've put a lot of work with the department, my teachers in the middle school. We wrote our implementation guides to ensure that they were standards aligned. And we created common assessments for every unit that the teachers have been working on together. And I'm heartened to see that has made an impact. And over time, I expect that to improve, because the first thing is you got to get your curriculum aligned with the learning goals that are assessed on the test. And we do that through our assessments. Our assessments are kind of driving that consistency and getting consistency across the 3 buildings. The buildings were all over the place. So I'm heartened by that, because that showed me that that's had an impact. Thank you. Thank you.
Justine even highlighted within buildings inconsistency that showed variation in teacher to the next in NGSS scores. And she really targeted to make sure that gap was closed even within the building.
I love hearing that. Thank you. Last question I had was about the NWEA. And I was just hoping you could remind me of the value of the test. And I do get it as a fall, winter, spring, but then I also heard that it was valued because it predicts the SBA. And I don't like hearing that, because I hate to think that we're giving our kids a test so we know how they're going to do on a test. Now, I know I'm making that sound ridiculous, but that's kind of how it comes across. Plus we have the common assessments we're creating. So we've got SBA, we've got NWEA, we've got our common assessments. It's a lot of testing. And of course, we need to have bang for our buck on assessing, because if you're assessing, you're not instructing. And so you have given time up to allocate it to that. And so I was hoping to hear, at least specifically on this one, the value of the NWEA, because again, as a predictor of the SBA, I don't see, and I'm happy to be educated about that. I don't see value in taking a test to predict how you do on a test. Like, I think there's value in the PSAT, because in fact, you will do better on the SAT straight up the more practice you have taking the tests and learning the tools. I don't like to think of that with our elementary school kids.
And that's not the reason we get it.
I didn't think so, but that's what I just want to hear more about that.
So it's required that we provide a universal screener assessment 3 times a year. And we previously utilized STAR for that purpose. And it didn't have the correlation that we needed to see between STAR and the SBA. NWEA does. So it allows to, some of the points that were made earlier, the ability for us to identify specific strands or standards that students are still struggling in, so that teachers can then adjust their instruction accordingly.
Does it usually then involve bringing coaches, extra instruction, or students going outside of the class, or is it affecting what the classroom teacher is doing?
What we like about NWEA is it measures not only achievement, but it measures growth. It's our growth measure. And we're seeing, because I'm mentioning growth, we're seeing that students are growing, but they're not growing enough in some cases. And NWEA helps us to see that. NWEA helps us to know what students are ready to learn. So it'll bucket students for your core teacher, and it'll tell you this group of students is ready for this part of the standards work, but this group of students is ready for this part of the standards work. It helps to know how much, and I want to use this term kind of loosely, differentiation you need to, right? I know. Differentiation you need to provide within your core. But what's better about that is to know what kind of scaffold you need to provide, so that those students, they can't do this yet. What is it that I need to do to give them an entry point into that grade level standards? So.
Is that data that the teachers have immediate access to, or they need an intermediary to have it explained to them? I'm not saying that critically, like, I don't know in what form it comes out.
they're able to access it immediately. Yeah. And then, of course, Patty, our data assessment coordinator, has pretty charts for us so that we could really boil down what it is that really needs to happen. But no, they have immediate access to it. It's one of the best screeners out there. It's so comprehensive. And I'm going to tell you something you just mentioned. Are we over testing? I keep hearing from our third grade teachers and our principals, we really want something even more comprehensive at the grade 3 level. So we're required by legislation to do Acadience, something like Acadience, which is a different kind of assessment. It's not as comprehensive and deep, but they kind of like NWA and the data it provides. So
Good to hear.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
So can we, clarify, which tool are you declaring to the state as our universal screener? MAP or Acadience?
It's on the grade level. Acadians is K3.
But there's NWEA data in here
For math, not for literacy. The literacy part that's legislatively mandated is.
shows Acadience.
Acadience is Dibbles. So Acadience is the platform that houses Dibbles. Dibbles are those curriculum-based measurement tools that you would also find part of them class. Like there's a Dibbles 8, we use Dibbles Next. They are your screeners. There's individual measures at different grade levels, that sort of thing. It helps to predict if students are going to reach future reading benchmarks, and very, very important tool for us to use to be able to see what is it that students need next.
So NWA doesn't start till grade 4.
For reading. If we were not required by legislation to do something different, NWA is not approved at the K3 level for reading, but we can use it for math. We're not bound by legislation for math. We can pick and choose. The state is reviewing the list of approved assessments next year. They're bringing in some other organizations to do that, and we'll see if Acadience continues to make it to the list.
All right, thanks. Maybe through the chair to Mr. Testani, I'm gonna, similar to Mrs. Max and Kennelly, I think last year we got an update by grade of how many assessments. It might be worthwhile to maybe see that again, not for any other reason, but just to kind of keep track a little bit as things are moving rather quickly. And to Ms. Goss's point, as our staff maybe identifies what's better for them, I think it's important for the board to see a little bit of level set, like where we're at. And I think we get questions from parents as well. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have that number.
I believe the assessment calendar is on the website.
No, I think we had it in the Friday packet where it was like third grade. I could be completely wrong. I'm gonna actually go back and look. I don't want to have staff ask, but I think it was a little bit.
Zavajancic.
Yeah, I think it was a little, right? I don't want to.
The amount of time it took for each assessment, that's.
Yeah, and like I said, if it's a huge staff ask,
Oh, we can get it.
yeah,
for
I just
you.
think it might be a good baseline.
We are assessing less now than we did in previous.
So even better, it's a good baseline to have. Do you mind if I do one more? Ms. Goss, you mentioned the science of reading workshops for staff. I'm just gonna do my plug that I kind of do whenever we talk about this. Whenever you're ready to do those for parents, I think there's a lot of people who are following this data and listening to podcasts and seeing the homework coming home looking different and seeing, our staff's mighty efforts. So anytime the parents can support, I think homework workshops or things like that are things, we see how popular our STEAM nights are, and any engagement you can have with our parents or PTAs to support your work in ELA, I would wholeheartedly support.
Yeah, this is a follow-up. Thank you for asking that. I'm curious through the chair to discuss. I know that there were some meetings held at the start of the school year. I think it was the company that hosted them. I was wondering that's a great point. How well attended were they?
Not as well attended as we would have hoped. So we thought that a better conduit would be to go directly through the schools rather than do like a district-wide. So there was a request to repeat what we did over the summer, just to share with families the material, resources, what they had access to online, which is pretty minimal. There's vocabulary interactive on there. They can listen to stories being read aloud, that sort of thing. And so the parents asked if we could redo the session. Family engagement is one of our 5 priority goals of our elementary literacy plan, and we do have plans throughout the year to be able to engage families, but we're feeling that it's probably better to do it at the school level rather than to try to bring everybody together district-wide.
Thank you. I'm gonna plug up whenever we get a chance.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I think one of the takeaways is next year, feel free to brag a little bit. To give us something to focus on. Nice to start, but thank you very much for this. Keep looking to our. If I can just decide, I noticed somewhere in the process, we lost Mrs. Rinaldi.
Yes, I let the secretary know the timestamp, and she had a work commitment tonight, so she was only able
I knew
to.
the schedule was iffy, so thank you for noting. I would have said to note that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, so we'll move on to old business. Item 6, approval 2025-2026 student calendar with a recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the 2025-2026 student calendar. Can I have a Mrs. Jacobson, seconded by Mr. Lee? Any comments or amendments? Ms. Raisa?
Yes, I had notified the board ahead of tonight's meeting that I do have, despite some discussion on other items, the only amendment I plan to bring forward tonight, which I'll do now if it's okay, is to make a motion to amend the wording at the start of the bottom box of the calendar where it says the first 6 snow days. I would like to change that to the first 5 snow days. All right.
Can I just have some clarification?
Okay.
First, you need a second.
First, you need
You
a-
seconded.
So the only change is the number 6.
Changing the number 6 to 5.
Perfect, thank you.
And now that the motion's on the table, can I just give the rationale? And the rationale behind this is that, as is noted on the calendar that was requested by a board member or multiple board members, the Juneteenth holiday, by changing this to 5 snow days, before we start taking from the April break, will ensure that the absolute last possible day of school would be June 18th. That's my rationale.
Comments? Members of the public with any comments? All right, then back to the board. All in favor of the amendment? Mr. Krasno, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Jacobson, vote is 9-0. 8-0. My apologies. And then back to the main motion. Any other comments or amendments? Any members of the public wish to comment? We'll bring it back to the board for approval of the amended 2025-2026 student calendar. All in favor? The motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much. Moving on. Policies. Approval of policy 5154, suspension and expulsion / due process, with recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 5114, suspension and expulsion / due process. Moved by Maxon Kennelly as second. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, so I didn't receive any questions on this. It's kind of straightforward. We didn't get very creative with this. It was pretty much as staff recommended, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to tackle them now.
Questions from the board? Any members of the public who wish to comment? All right, then back to the board. All in favor? Unanimous 8-0 vote. Moving on to item 6C, approval of policy 5141.231, psychotropic drug use per the policy audit. With recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 5141.231, psychotropic drug use per the policy audit. Moved by Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, second by Mr. Asa.
Yep, I know this is definitely one everybody's been waiting to tackle. But again, actually, I'm not even sure if we touched this one at all. Again, came to us all from staff in terms of what was needed, but happy to take a shot at anyone's questions if you have some now. Or not.
Looks like no questions from the board. Any questions from the public? All right, coming back to the board. All in favor? Unanimous 8-0 vote. All right, item 6D, approval of policy for deletion. 6141.313, homeless students, with the motion that the Board of Education approve the deletion of policy 6141.313, homeless students, by Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, seconded by Mr. Asa.
So again, this was a duplication, so just cleaning up the policy manual.
Comments from the board? Public? The board, all in favor? 8-0. All right, 6E, approval policy for deletion 5143.2 accidents. With motion that the Board of Education approve the deletion of policy 5143.2 accidents. With the motion by Ms. Maxon Cannelli, seconded by Mr. Lee.
Another duplication.
Any board comments? Any public comments? All right, back to the board. All in favor? 8-0. We're moving ahead. All right.
You jinxed us.
Well, I'm coming to the thing that I think it's going to be more competent. Approval, 6F, approval of policy 6151 class size with the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve policy 6151 class size. Ms. Maxon Cannelli, seconded by Mr. Asen.
So again, I received no comments or questions, or perhaps more importantly, any suggested amendments. That's not to stop anyone from doing it now. My only suggestion, maybe I'm saying this unnecessarily, is that if this turns into a, kerfuffle, that if it's enough to just give feedback to send back to policy, we can do that. But otherwise, we've taken our shot at it. So we wouldn't be ready to take this on again unless we had very targeted feedback from the board.
With that, any comments from the board?
I just want to go on record. I still feel we should have a stopgap early, but I do like some of the changes you did make to amend to a lot of what the feedback was. So I'm not going to hold it up. I just want to go on record. I still feel that would have been a good addition.
Ms. Lynn?
I want to thank the policy committee for their work on this. We had several meetings with the entire board. It got sent back and forth. We all had a lot of strong views on it. I still continue to have a strong view on it. In terms of, I'd just like to see that number lower to begin with. And I don't necessarily know if the policy committee or a district can get there, but just for me, that's where I'm at. And it doesn't really reflect necessarily the work of the board, just where I'm feeling about the policy. But thank you for the work.
Mr. Asen?
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat. I made my statements at the last meeting. I believe personally, this is a little too prescriptive, and I can't support this policy because of that.
And just as a reaction to that, I definitely hear that point. I think we had started in one place. We did a lot of wrestling with this to try to get to this point. And the one thing I would like to say through the chair to Mr. Testani, while we had to have gone through more hypotheticals with this policy than many that we have ever done, I think we need to know if we got it wrong, because this is on the board now. This is not on staff. We asked we're not the one who initially initiated our review of this policy, but we are certainly the ones who took it by the horns and made it our own, and we own it. And that means if we have steered the district poorly, handcuff the district in a manner that is not good for students, I think we need to be open to getting that feedback. And if we have to make changes in the future, I think that's something, again, we own. So I would invite the superintendent to let the policy committee know, and let the full board know. Actually, I should say probably it's more appropriate, let the full board know that you're requesting some reconsideration, because I don't disagree with Mr. Asa. This is absolutely more prescriptive than I like that we updated it. I'm happy with where we landed for the most part, but I'm repeating myself, but just that we need to hear your feedback if we've done something that steers the district badly.
Well, I mean, hearing a lot of your discussions over the last several months, I think it was difficult to really land on anything that you could say, this is right or this is wrong. I mean, it was not an easy task. I think we give it some time, see how things go. And if there's some things that we see pop up in next year, for example, at the start of the school year, that makes it difficult to make decisions, that we can always provide that feedback and maybe come back and revisit this. But I think it needs some time first.
Agreed.
I think wherever you would have landed, I think being open to seeing how things go and reconsidering based on the information and the circumstances that we have to adjust for is always going to be helpful. But I don't think there was any way that you can say this is right and this is wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys talked about this
A while.
at length.
Yeah.
And considered every possible scenario, even scenarios that I don't think anyone else would have ever thought of. So I think let's let it sit for a while. Let's let things unfold and then come back with anything if we see any problems in the future.
Jacobs.
I think that this policy is better than the one that we've got. It moves the needle in the right direction at least. I agree with Mrs. Flynn. I would have liked to have seen at least our K2 get lower. I think there were compromises put in this policy. Person on the board that gave feedback when we originally each gave it. I don't think anybody got exactly what they wanted in it. For me, there are pieces of it that I love, and there are pieces on it that I wouldn't necessarily vote for myself. I didn't vote it out of policy for that, to make note that it wasn't, and I know as a committee, you know, in its perfect form, but there are some good pieces in it, especially, also not forgetting the part about the secondary classes that we are concerned about and want to make sure that there's some good guidance for them and meeting needs of all types of classes and coursework that our high school students take. So while I'm not thrilled with it in its entirety, compromise based on the feedback that the board gave. So at this point, I'll support it reservedly. But yeah, I just want to get that on the record that it's, I think everyone here is feeling compromised in this policy and hope that we continue striving for the best. Thank you.
So I'll echo just briefly what Jacobs said. I can't leave the policy as is. And obviously, you know, we are at a point where almost nobody is completely happy. And it's probably a sign that a lot of work was done and now we need to have the rubber hit the road. So if you're willing to support that, then I can get behind this with the same reservations that I have about from Mr. Asa. Let's see how it works in practice. Yep. Any other board questions? Members of the public, any comments on this measure? All right, back to the board. All in favor? We have Mr. Krasnoff, Mrs. Jacobson, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Guernsey, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mrs. Flynn. All opposed? Mr. Lee, Mr. Asa. This 6-2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're on to new business. Item 7, discussion of 2025-2026 FPS budget initiatives and drivers. Mr. Dunn.
So, as we enter the beginning phase of the budget building, we are still in the preliminary phases, but we have a pretty clear understanding of some of the things that will drive this year's budget. Key factors being contractual obligations and healthcare costs are the biggest ones, as they always are. We did and are in the first year of a new teacher's contract that I think we're all aware needed to help with recruitment and retention, and I think we achieved that just by the sheer number of people who left year over year and the number of vacancies that, or issues that we had in, or non-issues in filling those vacancies. So that being said, just with contractual obligations and the estimated health care that we currently have, and those numbers, as we know, will not come in until later on in the process. I wish we could get a better understanding of that sooner, but we won't. We're at a little over 5% of an ask there alone. So that being said, we're also seeing, and we've talked extensively about the increases in cost of goods and services impacted by inflation to add to overall expenses. We are going out to bid for our transportation contract. We are not anticipating seeing a decrease in transportation costs with by going out to bid, but we have figured in an escalation of about 4%. Talking to a lot of my colleagues across the region that have negotiated new contracts for transportation. That's the average they're seeing, about 4 to 4.2% increases to transportation costs. As a result, You all saw the email after the analysis, and that was a high-level analysis done by First Student. If we did increase walking distances, we would see possibly a significant decrease to our transportation costs. So that could be something that we consider during the budget process. We will be seeing approximately $600,000 reduction to our excess cost reimbursement from the state, which is pretty significant. Again, that is something that, we've been fighting just as districts across the state to try to do some changes in how that money is distributed, but it's falling on deaf ears. I brought up as part of the Commissioners Advisory Council, and I'll continue to bring up that instead of looking at only excess costs, we should be rewarding districts such as ours who build good in-house programming. We do pride ourselves in not sending kids out of district, and for that, we don't get a reward or a benefit to that, and I think we should. That's something that I'm going to continue to advocate for as we go through the process. Other than that, we're pretty much trying to maintain our current programming and staffing levels. We are looking at the possibility, now that we have a new world language liaison who is dual certified and has experience with our ML population, if we can get an offset to creating a program director as we did last year with performing arts. But if there's no offset and we can't balance that as an even net zero cost, we're not going to introduce that. And looking at our IT budget, working with our new IT director, Marco, we've made some and seen some savings there. We're trying to find a little more savings because we're all in agreement through our teachers and administrators, and also the IT department is a big proponent of the transition from Infinite Campus over to Power School, which would be a one-time yearly increase in our budget because we would have to run both systems simultaneously. That is the recommendation of the Power School folks because it would be a disaster trying to do it all in one shot. That's mainly because 99% of the districts across the state use Power School. We are one of a handful that do not. Greenwich uses something fancy. Yeah, I never had any experience with that. So other than that, that's all we're trying to do right now in this year's budget to try to become responsible in the fact that, we do have an increase, a pretty hefty increase because of our contractual obligations. We're putting a little bit more in reserve in our substitute line budget because we're seeing over the last couple of years that our substitute costs have gone way up. We don't see that changing this year thus far. We are seeing more and more long-term absences, a lot due to maternity leave. So we're really happy for our staff that are starting families or expanding their families, but that does come at a cost as well. We are trying to put in some safety nets there, but we're thinking of allocating about $400,000 in addition to our substitute line to make sure that we have enough and we don't have to come back to the board and to the Board of Finance later on. We do have a couple of maintenance projects that I've talked extensively with Mr. Papa George, that one involving the elevator at Ludlow High School that needs to be done, and a fire system over at Ludlow Middle School. Those are pretty hefty projects that I think that we should go to the town for as an aside, but we are thinking of including that in our maintenance budget for the coming year. We are looking at reductions across the board. One of the reductions that you'll see in the budget when we present it is in our tree maintenance. And we're going to try to go back to the town. That I think that's some of the responsibility that they need to pick up rather than put that on us. And a few other items that I'd like to meet more closely with town officials to see if we can shift from our maintenance budget onto theirs. I think some of the things that live in our budget should live on the town side, but that's what we're looking at simply again, teacher's contract has escalated some of the costs, a little bit more than we anticipated in year one, but they should level off in year two. A lot of it is lane changes, people having the opportunity to move from master's to sixth year, but also the reopening of the seventh year lane as well, which in the early part of the contract, in the early steps, is not a significant increase year sliding over, but as you get into the latter part of the salary schedule, each individual that moves over is a significant change in an increased year over year.
Mr. Jacobson.
I just wanted to follow up on the excess cost question. When you said $600,000 reduction, is that in addition to the $600,000 reduction that we already had? Meaning we're 1.2, because we already had a $600,000 reduction last year. Is this just a carry forward of that same?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not an addition.
No, but it's,
Okay, so from 2 years ago.
yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure it didn't double. Okay.
Comments? I guess I'll just say, I keep thinking about this 5% number, and I think it's underappreciated the degree to which last year we came in at a much better rate than surrounding towns.
Yes.
I think we've been very responsible, and I certainly don't see having kind of more credentialed teacher staff as a problem. So I think that as we pitch the budget to other town bodies, that we need to focus on what we're getting for that extra money. It's significant, and it has a real impact on our kids.
Yeah, and a lot of what the teachers are taking courses on are really aligned with the goals in our district improvement plan. And what we'd like to see, a lot of them are around the areas of SEL. A lot of them are getting more in depth in their content areas. So we are getting a bang for our buck, and we're also keeping highly qualified teachers here in Fairfield rather than losing them to other districts and then having to start over with other staff. So we are seeing the benefits of it, but it will come at an initial cost, and I think it'll level off after that.
Apologies, Mrs. Flynn.
Thank you. I would just highly recommend any kind of data we have in terms of teacher retention, like what the contract is affording us. I would tell that story. I would tell it visually. I would tell it in capital letters. I would point it out, because I think that we are going to make some concession. Like I said, you're talking about looking at walking distance. We're looking at other things of the town about services. I think highlighting what we are getting from those contractual agreements is going to be vitally important this budget season. So that would be my bit of advice.
Getting a great teaching staff. That's
We want to like I said,
maintaining it.
let's maintain and brag about retaining our staff. I think it's a good bragging moment.
A quick follow-up to that, because it has been an explicit public comment of other town bodies, well, we're not losing anybody. And that's simply not the case anymore. So I agree with Mrs. Flynn. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the hard to fill shortage areas, we've been able to stop the bleeding there as a result, I think, of a better teacher's contract. And I think you're going to see that the increases in asks across the region are going to be no different. Costs of everything has gone skyrocket through through inflation, and, there are other teachers' contracts and administrators' contracts that are being negotiated. So things are not getting cheaper, they're getting more expensive. And transportation costs is, again, something that we're going to be facing with a bid coming up. And, we may need to make some decisions to looking at. We heard resoundingly through the redistricting process that walking distances were great and all the benefits to our students in being able to walk to their neighborhoods.
Any other comments? We'll be hearing much more about this in the coming months.
Absolutely. Well,
now, Mr. Testani, are we getting, I know Mr. Zevjinsik is not here, are we going to get a presentation for us?
Yes.
Okay. So item 7B, first read course, digital design for apparel.
Yeah, this was a course that was previously in our program of studies. There was no formal curriculum for it. It was reported to the board a while back. It was taken out of the program of studies. They are now back to present the formal curriculum. On approval, then it will go back into.
Can I ask one quick follow-up?
Are there any more?
You may not know this. It might be a question for Dr. Jansen.
Yeah, he would know if there was any of the removed courses that people are working on creating the curriculum for approval.
Just curious.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. As mentioned, this is a course that was formerly in the program of studies that is no longer here, but the goal is to put it back here after by the board for the 25-22 year. Tonight, I'm joined by Kathy Mason, who is our liaison for the Family and Consumer Science Department, and Donna Huber, who's one of the teachers in the Family and Consumer Science Department, and they will be presenting today on the digital design for apparel.
Welcome. I'm gonna default to Donna. Donna has actually taught this course before, and she has written this course, and she will do it justice better than I can. So I'm gonna lead the way with this.
All right. So obviously digital design for apparel course. So there's no prerequisite. This is a standalone course for one semester. It is open to students grades 9 through 12. So who's going to take it? And it's for students who are interested in any aspect of the apparel design, professional or personal use. And there are two aspects of learning in this course. One, that students will learn the skills to Adobe Illustrator software. And two, that students will learn the skills of how to use the software in fashion design to create designs, plats, fabric designs, and collections for a fashion collection and tech packs. And I'll get into explain what the difference is. So students who will take it. So again, it is 9 through 12, and students who would like to explore, have an interest in the design aspect of fashion design. Advanced fashion and design students who wish to expand their knowledge of designing garments through computer generation. These students are familiar with hand drawing their designs for croquis and flats, and as well as putting them together in the presentations of their see it better here, constructed collections. And students who pursue fashion design at the university level would be required to take a more advanced class of this nature, since designers who manufacture via factory would need to express designs in a manner that is standard with the implementation of the production process. So just to back up just a smidge, so if you go to number 2, the difference between croquis and flats. One is what the croquis is, how it looks like on the person wearing the garment, and the flats are what are the mechanical designs that would go into producing them. So 2 parts that we have if one student takes the class. So the first one would be the first one at the top is that there's 4 types of students that would want to do it, right? So the students who are interested, but not necessarily ready to commit to a full year of fashion and design one, which includes construction. Other students who are interested in fashion design, but not necessarily ready to commit to a full year of fashion design curriculum because this includes construction of clothing and perhaps that's not their nature, that they're more designing, is not really implementation in it. And then students currently in fashion and design classes who do fashion design artwork by hand, and they want to learn how to do it on the computerized design level, which would be a more professional way of doing it. And upper level students currently in fashion and design who want to go on, and they're realizing that that's a course that's going to be needed at the university level, and they want to get a leg up on how to do it. And then what happens, those who sometimes just take the course will end up finding that they're kind of interested in design, and they will move on to design 1 to learn how to implement what they've done. And then other type of student would be a student who just wants to take standalone classes because their schedules don't allow it, and they'll either go on to fashion industry strategies or interior design, like another area within the fashion strand. Oh, thanks. Too many things going on. So examples of learning, if you take a look at the pink jacket, they would start learning how to design with the different kinds of seams and zippers. They'd learn how to make zippers, and it's the whole intricate process. And then they move on to actually have one lesson where they take their own garment And they would recreate it onto a croquis, which is showing how it's worn. And if you look really closely, I don't know if you can tell, but there's measurements on the shoulder, there's measurements on the front, there's measurements so that in the event that it went into production, the production people knew how to implement it via what it looks like and with the sizing. Another example of learning is how to zoom. So if you look at the pants on the left-hand side, things like they've designed the pant, this is what it looks like. And you know what? There's a really special button on these pants. How's the manufacturer going to know that there's a special button? So it's a zooming in. How does that work? The next thing would be if you are doing a collection of pants. What kind of fabric are you going to design? Can you make it bigger? Can you make it smaller? How does it look in a stripe? How does it look? So they get to basically see how their designs would be implemented if they go on. So this is actually a summative, and this would be a collection board, and they need to have an inspiration. This student had something summer vacation. They had to put 3 pieces of a coordinating collection. They had to show the fabric swatches. If you look at the just flat straight on, that's the flat. If it looks like it's worn by a body, that would be a croquis. Sometimes you would have a croquis physical body in there, or you could just show it that way. So these are just examples of learning. And we don't have any personnel requirements other than we've run it in the, I've taught it in the past and there was no changes to personnel. Sometimes we change it up year by year versus fashion industry strategies or interior design, depending on what the popularity is for the year for classes. Questions? Comments?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Questions or comments from the board? Let's raise it.
So you said this has not been taught for years. And this is not in any way a criticism or a judgment, but why do we need it back?
I have had students who said, why did they take it off? They wanted to take it. I actually have seniors this year that I'm teaching on an independent study for them because they want to know it, because they want to go on to it at the university level and they want to learn about it. It's also an interesting feature for 9th grade students, middle school. I want to get their feet wet. This might work well as a 1-semester course as opposed to a full year fashion and design class. Take up a whole semester.
And with regard to the every other year, you know, you just mentioned something, but is there that much demand? Like, is every other year sufficient?
Depends. I mean, I've had years, like for instance, this year I'm teaching 2 sections of interior design because that's what they want to take because this wasn't offered. So there's always like a give and take. Electives tend to do that.
Comments? Oh, Ms. Jersey?
Thank you for this presentation. This class was just like super creative and a lot of fun, and I love the technology component. I think it's fantastic. Just wanted to share, not at all as a criticism of you, but this is more at central office. As the curriculum liaison, I would just share that it was not, I was not given any updates on this class. And this is the first time I'm seeing it too. So that's just information for this board and for watching, but I support this. I think it's fantastic. I guess one thing I'm thinking about, but also this isn't really just about this class, but this idea of offering classes every other year or on a certain timeline, is that something that, I don't have an answer to this, but is that something that would be helpful to give to the students for their planning purposes? I mean, are you aiming to do, if you're aiming to do it versus if that's just the way it shakes out based on demand? I'm not sure what the strategy is there, but it, you know, and it doesn't apply just to this class. It's any class that doesn't run semester.
I would be happy to teach this every year, but it would all depend on numbers. I mean, sometimes it just depends who's interested in taking classes. How does it fit into their schedules? I'm all in for this. It's a lot of fun teaching.
I think the tech aspect of it, I think is a big draw, you know?
Mrs. Maxon Kelly?
Yeah, just to follow up on Mrs. Guernsey's question, but the idea is, I know in college courses, for example, it might say offered only fall semester, or offered every other year. So to that point of, were you saying that part of the advertising, it's only every other year? Because then that would be the point of students need to know that for their planning, or is it simply driven by course enrollment? Okay.
Originally, we thought we would flip flop it so that students could get to, oh, they're gonna offer interior design this year. Okay, well, I'll take interior design, and next year when you offer digital, I'll take digital, so that they could get more of a background of what they're interested in, that whole strand. But it's turned out numbers, it's been numbers driven, where are we gonna serve the most students?
Just offer them both and the numbers will fall where they are. Okay, just a couple of other questions. What does this fulfill any graduation requirement? Would it just count for the electives?
Elective.
Okay, what about budget impact? I assume, do we have to purchase whatever software is needed for this, or?
This is Adobe Design, the Adobe Illustrator, so we already have it.
Oh, that's it. Okay. And then my last question was, is there any overlap with Design 1 such that if a student took this in the fall semester and somehow, got the bug, would they be able to go into the second semester of Design 1, or that's really two separate?
This Design 1, and they would have to take it for the full year starting in.
So there's no overlap. In other words, there's no redundancy where you could say, well, I've already fulfilled some of the background from Design 1. Okay.
It's all the concepts that you teach are be like the elements and principles of design, and what type of construction goes into if you're going to present a garment, things like that. But it's presented differently. So it'd be nice if they had the background to understand how to apply it to something else. And I have had students who take Design 1 and then they decide to take this class, and it's kind of easy for them because they understand when I said, listen, you got to put a dart in there, they know exactly what I'm talking about, as opposed to teaching what is a dart. And I just have to go with the flow of the class.
But simply not enough overlap that it could be fulfilled. Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. President, how many people do you anticipate enrolling for you to be able to have the class?
Very fluid.
It
You
really
never
just
know.
depends on a number of factors, like they mentioned before, what other classes they need that may conflict in terms of that period.
But I mean, like, there's gotta be a target amount of kids, because you said it's every other year, so are we talking like 15 students need to enroll to be able to have the class? Or is it 5 enroll, you wanna be able to have?
Yep, it varies. I mean, we can say that we would like to have 15, but that doesn't mean that 15 will actually be able to enroll in the class, and they may request it, but it not actually fit into that. Are you asking what is the minimum?
Well, it's more in terms of taking away. I don't wanna see trying to do this class and taking away from the other class. Like, where is the standard that we decide which class to do?
Right, so it would be based on the course request, but also what fits into their schedule in terms of which one would run. It wouldn't be, okay, this one is brand new, it's absolutely running with 2 kids in it, per se. It's, if we have another course that's in conflict with this, and that one has 15, then there's a decision that we have to make just based on course requests and course enrollment, what fits in the student schedule, what they need for graduation. There are a couple of factors that fit into there.
One of the things is this opens the door to students who are only looking for a half-year course, where fashion design 1, 2, and 3 are full-year courses. This opens the door for those who want to, get their feet into it, but they can't commit to a full year.
I completely get that. I was talking more in terms of staff, like staff's gotta teach the course, so where is our staff best utilized was more of my question.
So wherever the enrollment is the highest would be the decision that would be made.
Mr. Lee?
This course, if I'm that fashion student, even without advertising it, this is the course I need to get to that next level of the FIT or the Pratt, that kind of school.
You don't need it. It will give you a leg up in that when you have to take a digital design course and the instructor says you're going to be learning Adobe and let's understand how to set up a board, you'll be like, got it, well, how to do this. And then you would do the more intricate work that they want. It's basic. It gets your design communication across. It gives you a feeling for what it is, and then they would go on and do bigger and better things at the university level.
So the basic part of this course won't change in 2 years, 3 years. You have the basics.
Like 1 year, I didn't teach it. 1 year in between in Adobe tweak software bit and I just had to like learn a little bit, but it's just
Concepts
basically
is-
what the concept's the same. Yeah.
And just a similar follow-up, the skills of Adobe Illustrator can be utilized in a variety of different arenas. So while a student may get their toes wet in design, they could take Illustrator to a variety of other areas, right?
They'll start to understand what's a board setup, you know, how do I close a shape?
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. I imagine this is going to come back to us in our next meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. All right, item 7C, approval of the educational specifications of the Stratfield Elementary School partial roof replacement project. Recommend motion that the Board of Education approve the education specifications for the Stratfield Elementary School partial roof replacement project. Ms. Maxon Kelly, seconded by Mr. Lee. Oh, Mr. Pop, yours. Thank you. Take it away.
Garfield Elementary School, as you know, was in our waterfall. It's been approved for funding by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. Still waiting for RTM approval. You have here the ed specs. It's our standard ed spec for a roof replacement project, standard questions. We're hoping to get the building committee set up so that we're right behind the funding and we can move forward.
Comments or questions? Next.
I only have one quick question. Do we get a combined building committee? Does one committee do both?
Most of the time, this is assigned, because it's a roof, standard roof, it's assigned to the standing building committee, the town stands.
What they do.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other comments? Comments from the public? Back to the board, all in favor? Carries 8-0. And now item D for Tomlinson Middle School with the recommended motion that the Board of Education approves the education specifications for the Tomlinson Middle School partial roof replacement. Can I get a motion? Mr. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Jacobson.
So again, this one did move up slightly on the waterfall because of the phase 2 of the air conditioning projects. It didn't make sense to put equipment on the roof and then have to pull it off to replace the roof. Again, it's been before the Board of Finance, both approved, awaiting for the RTM. It is on the agenda and standard committee. This one we will most likely assign to the AC Building Committee as it will run in parallel with their project.
Board comments or questions? Questions from members of the public? Back to the board, all in favor? Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you all for allowing these to be one and done.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on. Item 8, approval of minutes with recommended motion that the Board of Education, can I get unanimous consent to waive the waive? Any comments or questions? I did have one quick question. This may actually be for our previous secretary. I was interested to see the minutes provided for the town hall. Then looking back, I noticed that we haven't always done minutes for town halls. We're just trying to be more comprehensive, or did we get an opinion?
We don't normally do, well, it's historically we've done both. So the idea is that the minutes exist, but the detail is consistent with what we've done more recently.
No, it's fine. I didn't know if there was some other directive.
There's no directive for it. It's just, you know, historically, like going way back, there would be detailed minutes. Then in the more recent past, there are not detailed minutes. But then when it doesn't exist as a document, I kind of have a problem with that there's nothing tangible. So, I mean, you know, if people don't want it, they don't have to vote for it, but I thought that was like a.
No, I say for me, I think it's completely consistent with what Robert's rules wants about things that were done rather than things that were said. And so like, if it's a meeting, it came, we had this moderator.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with it. I didn't know we have flip-flopped.
We've done both. We've done both.
Any other comments, questions? All right, all in favor? Thanks so much. Item 9, superintendent's report.
Okay, just a few items of celebration first. This week, we celebrate National School Psychology Week. Our school psychologists play a vital role in supporting the well-being and mental health of all our students. They provide a safe space for children to be themselves. They consult with staff to provide strategies and resources, foster important relationships with our students to help them thrive. So I just want to big shout out to all our school psychologists this week for all they do for our students here in Fairfield. November is Native American Heritage Month, time to celebrate the unique and diverse cultures and traditions of Indigenous people. It's also an opportunity to raise awareness about the experiences and challenges Native Americans have faced throughout our history and today. The Fairfield Police Department is presenting an internet safety event for parents. There was one that was done on social media awareness back on Wednesday, tomorrow, I'm sorry. Tomorrow evening at 6:30 at Ward, and on Monday at Ludlow at 6:30. The same content will be offered at both presentations. So if you can't make it tomorrow and Monday or vice versa, the event will cover critical aspects of social media use, including current trends, popular apps, and potential areas of concern regarding the use of social media amongst our children. The goal is to provide families with practical strategies and knowledge to help them guide their children safely and responsibly through the ever-evolving social media landscape. There'll be a Q&A session with experts from the Fairfield Police Department School Safety Division to follow the presentation. So I urge as many parents who are out there listening, if they can attend one of the two sessions. Tomorrow night, 6:30 at Ward, Monday, 6:30 at Ludlow. This year, the Sherman School community exceeded their goal for Thanksgiving meal kits for Operation Hope. Sherman students collected the items and donated to a gobble bank so neighbors in need can enjoy a Thanksgiving meal this season. So thank you to the Sherman community. We also had the privilege of having a contemporary a cappella pioneer, performer, arranger, music producer, and coach Deke Sharon joined grades 4 through 7 Fairfield Public School choral students last week for a morning of music and learning at Ward High School. Our music educators from across the district and Ward and Ludlow High School students helped support this very special event. Students had a great time. They really enjoyed it. Our RLMS students participated, if you didn't see it on News 12, in a mock presidential election last week using an old-fashioned voting machine. School-wide activity brought social studies curriculum to life and provided students with a hands-on opportunity to learn about the U.S. Electoral College system. Couple of housekeeping items. Last week, after the discussion at the Board of Special Board meeting, we went to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, I believe it was Wednesday evening, to advocate, and they both passed the approval of spending $1 million or up to $1 million on doing a more extensive look at few options. Number one, read the new build of Dwight Elementary School, the renovation as new of Dwight Elementary School, and the new build of Dwight with an ECC, as well as looking at the feasibility of Mona Terrace as a more long-term solution for ECC. They're going to also look at, in parallel, the skeleton building up on Barberry, as well as the possibility if there can be ECC added to Riverfield and or to Osborne Hill. So that money has been allocated. It has to go to RTM for final approval. And then the work will begin immediately to try to get some studies done to get more in-depth into what is entailed and what the cost of those projects could be.
Jennings traffic study too, right?
And Jennings traffic study, good point. Forgot to mention that. Focused more on the Dwight and the ECC, but that's also included in this as well. So these will all run parallel. Obviously the more pressing and top of the priority list is what can be done in the most effective and efficient way to get the Dwight School community what they need for the children and families up in Dwight. So that is a priority. Addition, I know there's been, just to give everyone an update, we had, per the request of a pulmonologist on behalf of a child up at Dwight who's struggling with some health issues, little boy up there, we did some testing to the air quality in the classroom, in the adjacent classroom, as well as the hallway area of the building. Everyone has seen the report back from the firm that came out and did the testing. They will now, and they have recommended, as a result of the testing, we're going to do the next phase of assessment of the building that is within the standards of DEEP, EPA, and Health Department Department of Public Health. From there, they will make recommendations if there needs to be any further action once they come in the next week or two to take some more assessments. And what that is will be part of the scope of work that they're going to send to us in the next couple of days. So stay tuned. We'll give everyone an update once we know more based on what that proposal looks like and what they recommend to be the next phases of assessment of the building.
Ms. Maxwell?
Just two quick questions. The $1 million, up to $1 million that was approved, do we know when that will be on an RTM agenda? I just know Mr. Papa George knew with the 2 partial roofs that what that was on. Do we know about this yet?
Yeah, the next RTM meeting for approval.
It will be, okay. And then secondly, that PD event, not PD, the police department event, is that something that's been blasted out to parents?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Rachel's been sending it out, putting it on social media for the event about social media.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Oh, I just wanted to add, thank you for the plug for Sharon, and just wanted to add that if you don't know him, he's really a national superstar. I mean, to bring him here to Fairfield to work with our students is a phenomenal opportunity. I mean, he's considered to be the father of modern a cappella, and he's like the music director for the Pitch Perfect movies. Like, this is a really big deal. So thank you.
I did a little background on pretty extensive.
It's astounding. So Dick Sharon.
Sharon.
Fresno.
Just a question and some clarity about Dwight and the whole test, just for the public, because I do know some parents are listening in. There wasn't anything per se toxic found, but they do need to do a little bit more research to make sure what they can find out about the building, correct? So more will be done.
Yes, more will be done, and from there, they'll provide us with a report as to if they recommend anything further beyond that, or whether they've done enough of an assessment to deem the building to be safe in terms of the indoor air quality.
Do you have any, I don't know if this is going to be in the scope of work, but do you have any ideas about where they were recommending this next part is being tested in? Is it, there's more classrooms? Is it the cafeteria? Is it the library?
I think it's throughout the building, from my understanding.
Oh, okay.
Any questions, comments? All right, item 10, committee liaison reports. Mr. Krasnoff?
CES met, they're in the process of electing. They also finalized their calendar, which CRFC. It's just a standardized calendar. They do have their own calendar and a standardized calendar. The state asked them to purchase a standardized calendar. They don't always actually necessarily follow the exact standardized calendar. So their own personal calendar. Next week or two. I'm sorry for the public if that sounds confusing, but it was confusing to me too. Yeah. Other than that, that's about it from CES. Thanks.
Ms. Lynn?
For PTA Council, the next general meeting of the PTA Council will be next Wednesday, November 20th at 7 PM in this room. And then the next meeting of the newly formed President's Circle will be December 18th at 7 PM in this room. And for Fairfield Cares, the next general meeting of Fairfield Cares is next Wednesday morning at 8:30 AM virtually and at Old Town Hall for any parents who are interested in attending. I think that's it.
Awesome.
All right, just a couple of things. transportation study. We're going to try to discuss this at the November Finance Committee meeting, but the report wasn't ready in time, so I'll be picking that up hopefully on the December meeting. We can delve into a little more detail. I did want to note, as far as Board of Finance and their approvals for our capital projects, one thing that was left off of their approval list was the $1 million turf field at Ward. I actually reached out to BOF Chair Charlton, and she wanted to say, like, these are the things, the roofs and the AC projects were the highest priority, but there are going to be ongoing discussions about bonding schedules, and we can have it be reconsidered to be put on the bonding schedule in February, and we'll still make the 2025 bonding calendar. So that's something that I'll be keeping an eye on. Those are my things. I'm sorry, Mr. Lee.
Just a quick recap. I couldn't attend the SEPTA meeting. I update the board another time. As far as the HVAC IAQ committee, as far as phase one, they're moving along. Construction will continue, especially with the holiday break coming up. I want to actually commend the construction management company and Mr. Papa George's staff. With so much construction going on during the downtime, from what I've been told, there hasn't been any major complaints about dust in the classrooms, dirt and stuff that I've been told that you would never know they were in there the night before during the weekends and stuff. So that says a lot for our construction management company and Mr. Papa George's staff to make sure that's business as usual.
Any other comments?
Oh, sorry, I did. I should have mentioned this during the budget drivers, but you're talking about the transportation study and talking about that there are potential cost savings. As a mechanism, if we ended up wanting to change the distances for our busing, does that have to be a policy change before it can be done for the budget?
It is in policy.
Correct. So I'm just throwing out there consideration of, if there needs to be a timeline of that, there's, again, I'll be re-upping asking to be on policy committee, but we need to know sooner rather than later, because right now it hadn't really been, we have an extensive future items list and that wasn't one of them. So just, we'd need a heads up.
Jacobson.
Yes, that topic's in all three committees.
What was that? I couldn't hear you.
The transportation piece is, and I think now in all three committees at this point, so we should probably communicate in terms of where everyone's standing. Same for facilities.
And to that point, we also need we need some public communication that it was being considered. That's not something I want to blindside parents with. They need to know we're looking at it.
Fair point. Any other committee liaison reports? Item 11, open board comment. Seeing none. Item 12, public comment.
Hi, Lauren Efren, 241 Burr Street, YPTA co-president, Board of Ed rep for RLMS, PTEC rep for both schools. Just in regards to the superintendent's report, I would just encourage you to give as much detail as possible with whatever you get back from the assessment. These preliminary reports and public health department, we have a lot of very concerned parents, which I'm sure you heard from. I'm one of them. I have a daughter who's severely allergic to mold, pollen, dust, basically any environmental allergen you can imagine. So I have an appointment with my allergist on Thursday. I know there's other parents who are scheduling appointments with pulmonologists, allergists, pediatricians. Everyone is very concerned. We ask that you update the Dwight community either in person or continue to send reports to get them. So that we can try to keep everybody's around us.
Well, Lee McGarry, President of the Fairfield Education Association. Just want to take the moment to thank Ms. Jacobson for her time serving the town as chair. We all know it's a very difficult time consuming, so your efforts are much appreciated. And best of luck to Mr. Peterson in your new role. Looking forward to working with you in the future. So thank you.
Other public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Krasnoff, seconded by Mr. Lee. All in favor? Vote is unanimous. Thank you very much.